Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andrew, Associate Editor of Audioholics, and I'm here with...
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Tommy. Happy birthday to you, which
And
I
now
can
we
now
get...
sing.
I know, I was going to say now we're going to get sued, but no.
No, we're not. The
We're not anymore.
copyright has been nullified. The silliness of people having to pay through the nose to sing happy birthday on a TV show is no longer. We won't be able to make that joke anymore, but that's fine. Now people can actually sing the song.
Yeah, so I guess does that mean that all these stupid restaurants where they sing you happy birthday and there's their own stupid song, that's all going to go away and they're going to go back to having...
I'm sure it's not all going to go away, but they no longer have a legitimate financial reason to avoid singing the real song.
Yes. Well, it's my birthday. I'm 44 years. I don't like people who say so many years young. So I am 44 years old. I'm feeling every bit of it today. Yesterday, Sunday morning, it's Monday. Sunday morning, my 6-year-old got up, walked out of his bedroom, said, I don't feel good, and then threw up for 28 hours. He threw up on and off for 28 hours. He just got better today around noon.
Well, he wasn't lying.
Yeah, he wasn't.
Yeesh.
Yeah, he wasn't feeling good. So now I always psychosomatically have whatever my kids have. So I'm pretty sure I've got it too. So I'm feeling nauseated and irritated and generally extra ranty.
Thank you for
So
using the correct word, though. It's not nauseous. It's nauseated.
it's almost
It's
like
one
I
of my
write.
pet peeves.
It's almost like I write. I don't actually write anymore. I should write some more, but lately I haven't been feeling it. Anyhow, this is AV Rant, the podcast where we answer your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us. You can email us generally at question or at questions@avrant.com. You can email Rob directly at rob@avrant or Tom at avrant. You can go to the podcast, which is www.avrant.com. That's our website, and leave a comment there. Or there may be some sort of comment form. I don't really remember if I ever put one of those on there. People seem to go to tomandrew.com occasionally and leave me a note that way, which does make it onto the podcast eventually. Facebook.com/AVRant podcast. We are very engaged over there. Twitter, Rob is at First Reflect. I am at AVRant_Tom. And Austin, our producer, is at Austin Pond. Austin has his own podcast. It's We Watch Movies, where they talk about music. Oddly enough, no, they talk about movies.
Yeah.
And they have degrees or some crap. I don't know.
I could not listen to their last episode because they just talked about The Martian, which I haven't watched yet. So
right.
that's like right up to date, man.
Yeah. So sometimes they do older movies, sometimes they do brand new stuff. So yeah, spoilers, I guess, are a thing to get worried about. Let's see. Anything else? Last week, did I do all the contact stuff? I did, right? Yeah, I did. Okay. Last week, James threatened to send us some covers for our panels. Did you get yours?
It was delivered by the post office, but it's waiting for me to pick it up. I have not had time yet because I worked all the days when it arrived, and I worked 12-hour days, so the post office is not open before or after I have finished work. So I will pick it up tomorrow, James.
Yes. So I got mine. I looked at it. I'm not going to spoil it for you. So
Okay.
yeah, we'll talk about that next week. So if you're
Yes.
wondering about these DIY panels from James, remember, we're getting beta versions, and we're going to give him feedback. He's getting it on the podcast. No, James, I will not be talking afterwards about this to you. So sorry, you have to wait for the podcast like everybody else. Speaking of which, some company said, hey, Tom, do you want a portable Bluetooth speaker thingy that we have to test and talk about on your podcast? And I said, no. But yes, I'll do it. So I got it. It arrived. Okay. It's been in this box because I wanted to take some pictures of it. I like to take the pictures as it first comes out of the box before my children touch it. So I will be we'll be talking about that next week as well. I don't remember what it's called. It's like a Sound Blaster Live Roar version 2 something.
All
It
right.
may be from Creative. I don't really remember.
If it's Sound Blaster,
it's in the other room. Yeah, it's
a Bluetooth speaker. How amazing could it be?
I don't really care. But I am a real big fan of the portable Bluetooth speakers, especially ones that are battery powered, which I believe this one is, because they legitimately have uses.
Yeah.
Unlike most docks and Bluetooth speakers that just sit there, you're like, okay, so either I can use this Bluetooth speaker that's right here, or I can walk right over there and use the big speakers that are way better. These you can take them outside. You can. I've even thrown them in cars with me when my wife's car has crappy radio, so I take it with me. I throw it in the car,
All right.
and that way I get to hear music without having to, you know, try to figure out some way to get it into their really crappy speakers that are in her car. So I like Bluetooth speakers, so I'm actually kind of excited about this.
All right.
That'll be next week.
Cool.
For this week, we do want to thank our listeners of the week. I guess we have hit 500 followers on Facebook.
Yeah.
So there's a milestone.
It is. I was going to mention it last week when it actually happened, but it completely slipped my mind. So I will mention it this week. We are now over 500 followers.
There we go.
That's very nice.
We also have to thank Tim, who supported the podcast by letting people know that he bought something because of us. And this time it was Denon. He bought an AVR X4000 from Accessories for Less, and he told Accessories for Less that he bought it because of us. And I'm sure Accessories for Less, I don't know how big that place is, but I'm not sure I think that might be yelling into the void. But hey, if you do it and we know about it, we're going to thank you. So Tim, thank you for supporting us in that manner.
Yes, thank you, Tim. Much appreciated.
Yes, and if you wanted to support us in a different way, you can go to the website and hit the buy us a cup of coffee and leave us a PayPal donation. One of these days, I'm going to get around to putting together a Patreon thing. The thing that's stopping me from doing it is laziness. And the fact that they want a video. I kind of feel like we should be able to do a video, but frankly, we can't do a good one because look at me. Look at the light that's on me right now. This is as good as it gets. I am not an attractive man. I understand that. And you are way far away. So I need all the help I can get. So I think I'm going to enlist my friend who used to do the video reviews for Audioholics, Andrew Gash, to help me do some sort of video. So I haven't been meaning to ask him to do that. I just haven't gotten around to it.
Well, I mean, we don't have to misrepresent ourselves. We could literally just put up exactly what people are going to see if they go to our YouTube page and watch the podcast. I mean, we could make it that simple.
Yeah,
it's truth in advertising.
And one of these days, you guys will get enough donations that we can afford some lights. That's the real ones. And then
it is a theater. It's supposed to be dark in there.
It is very dim in here. I have to bring in extra lights to look this bad. There's a couple more names on here, and I didn't put them there, so it must be you.
It was me. Just some more people to thank for well wishes for my mother, who is back home, but we're taking care of her as far as her health goes. So she's very much dependent on mostly my father. He's the one who's there every day, all the time. So it's going along. We're managing. We're working out some more resources and that to try and help out.
It's the new normal. You're in the
new normal now. Finding our way. I tell you, folks, illness and health and
don't
stuff.
Get old and don't get sick.
It's a lot. So Brian, Tom, and Karl, they all sent their well wishes this week. So thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it.
I did get quite a few people who just texted me or Facebook whatever me and said happy birthday. So that was nice.
That's nice.
I'm not going to name you all because
that's
that
goes on.
Yeah. All right. So in the news, I found this microlight screen. Microlight screen is one word. And Surface Materials, which is the rest of their name. So Microlight Screen, Surface Materials is the entire company name, I think, has announced their new Microlight Optical. It is a 9-layer ambient light rejecting projection screen. They promise it has 180-degree viewing angles and technically every screen.
I don't have a 180-degree viewing angle. I can't see things that are two-dimensional sideways on.
Technically, you could see it from a 360 degrees, but there's only going to be image on one side. Anyways, and a 3.0 gain while retaining deep black levels and accurate color, and I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, the whole claim to fame with Microlight Screen, which I believe is a Taiwanese company originally, there's several companies doing these sort of ambient light rejecting. Sometimes they call them black screens. Yeah. They say theirs is different because rather than just using a super dark substrate and then putting sort of like reflective things on top of it to give it brighter whites, theirs is actually an optical process which they say sort of mimics like an LCD, which means it's sort of that louvered, almost shutter style system. So if light is coming from above or the sides or below, these sort of louvers on the screen basically block that or send it back to where it came from. And then the projection image from the projector itself, lots of people have found with these screens that the projector has to be sort of within the borders of the screen. Like you can't have it mounted above the top edge of the screen. Otherwise, it doesn't really
Right.
work because then the louvers block its light. So yeah, it's using that type of system, and the claim to fame is that it's about $1,500 for a 100-inch screen size or so, which is quite a bit less expensive than a lot of other ambient light rejecting screens that use this type of technology.
Yeah, that's one of the things that interests me about it.
Hmm.
They always claim that they're going to get accurate color and deep
Yeah,
blacks and
yeah.
ridiculous.
I've never seen anyone claim otherwise.
Yeah, no one says, yeah, we do pretty good. Now, if you talk to the guys, they'll tell you, well, I mean, better than everybody else,
Right.
which is not exactly the same as having good and accurate. But what interests me was the fact that it was pretty cheap.
Hmm.
So we'll link that up. Rob has got a couple of pieces of news here. It looks like HDMI has
Yeah.
decided that 4K and HDR deserve their own special cables after all.
Ugh.
Premium high speed, which is better than regular high speed. It's premium. And it's extra
Why
for it.
did they do this?
Of course they did. Why wouldn't they do this?
Yeah.
Marketing guys love new names.
So first of all, you don't need a cable that specifically says premium on it for 4K and HDR to work. High speed cables that met the actual specifications for high speed back in the day, which is only yesterday at this point, they will work fine. It's not like they will not pass the signal along. What they're saying is that they found several high speed designated cables that actually had difficulty passing the 18 gigabits per second bandwidth, which is the now full bandwidth that can be passed along and is required for 4K with HDR. So they're saying, okay, well, now we're going to have this new premium high speed designation for ones that we've actually retested, recertified, and make sure they pass 18 gigabits a second. And they were very proud of their tamper proof sticker for them to stick on the outside of the box, because apparently they think everyone goes to the store and tries to rub the sticker off before buying an HDMI cable, as opposed to just buying it off of Amazon or Monoprice, which is where we all get our cables. Yeah, they were very proud of that sticker. Good on you.
You have too much news. Can I just say that?
Yeah.
I don't
Oh
want to
yeah.
read
No,
all
we can
this.
get rid of some of this. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Let me look through it. Oh, the Chromecast audio is
Yep.
a pretty cool little disc thing. You plug it into the wall for power, and then you plug it. It has a 3.5 millimeter port, and you plug that into a self-powered speaker, or use 3.5 to RCA stereo,
Mm-hmm.
of course, to plug it into some sort of amp or something,
Yep.
which is kind of cool. But you can stream just about anything. And I read the little write up on it, and the guy's like, "Yeah, I'm not sure what the audio quality is because it was in a whatever this big room and stuff, but." The competing product is from Sonos, and it does
Mm-hmm.
this, and it's $350, and Google's
Yeah.
Chromecast audio is 35.
Yeah.
So if it gets there, it's good enough. I'm like, yep,
Pretty much.
I
Yeah.
will take it.
The difference here with a Chromecast is similar to they just announced their new version 2
Yeah,
Chromecast for video services. Is the thing where you have to control it through a smartphone or a tablet. There is no native controller or separate
right.
remote
There's no
controlling.
remote.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
can't program a Harmony to work with this thing. It must be done through their app. But the thing is, once you start it playing and then you say, okay, now cast it to my Chromecast or cast it to my Chromecast audio if it's audio only, now that device, the little $35 teeny tiny little circle thing, it directly pulls the content. And now you can go ahead and use your tablet or smartphone to do whatever else you want. You don't need to keep the app open and active on your smartphone
yeah.
device. It's actually directly going. But of course, then if you want to, skip a track or something like that, you have to open the app back up in your phone and do it that way. So, but I mean, $35 for each of these things, that is definitely possibly a solution for whole house audio on the cheap. And on that tip, there's a new fellow who started following me on Twitter, Anthony R. He actually sent a link to a video. This was David McCabe, who's from the Home Service Show. He rigged up his own DIY whole house thing where he's using both the new Chromecast audio and AirPlay. Yeah. So he wanted both because they don't do all the services on both things. So yeah, that was a fun little video. We'll have a link to that on avrant.com.
And the last one we'll say is this on ABS forum. This guy did a write up about it was an Ask the Editor, and somebody said something about using a normal speaker to be an upward firing speaker.
Yeah.
And Mark, is it Henninger?
Henninger.
Henninger. Anyways, he answered
Mm-hmm.
and said he's been doing a lot of tests with it, and you can absolutely take a normal speaker. The thing is just don't tell it. Don't tell it is an Atmos speaker, which is an Atmos enabled speaker, which is that speakers that have the angled speakers on top of them, or one of those modules that you put on top of your normal speakers. Tell it instead that you are wherever you're kind of firing it towards, wherever that speaker would be on the ceiling, tell it it's that. He also suggested crossing it over fairly high at like a 120.
At least, yeah.
Yeah, so that you're not getting any bass, which is omnidirectional, will come to your ear faster than the mid-range and tweeter stuff, which will be hopefully bouncing off the ceiling. So crossing it over pretty high and
physically get them up high, because the whole idea is that you're not supposed to be hearing the direct sound before the reflected sound. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll give this a try, because I'll just try.
That's about the only way.
Upward.
You know, I've still got a fan on my ceiling, so I'm not allowed.
Yeah.
All right. We have one comment from a listener, David. This is over on Facebook. He was thinking about William's Netflix and HBO Go base woes that we've been talking about. This weirdness that's been going on with this streaming, where his Roku T3 and Apple TV give him weird audio bass tremors almost, and nothing else. He's got like every streaming device on planet, it seems like. Anyways, David thinks that the apps on those devices might have received an update that buggered up the audio, which is what this says here, though I don't know if I would have phrased it exactly in that way. Different devices get different amp versions, which might explain why the Roku Stick sounds fine, while the Roku 3 does not. Could be, dude. I don't know. Factory reset both of those things. Let's start with that, and then make them re-update, and then see what happens. You could try that too. At this point, you should try everything. Anything anybody comes up with, just try it until something works.
Yeah, we definitely know you should not be having those bass problems. There is no reason you should not be able to use your subwoofer and enjoy the sound coming from Netflix and HBO Go via a Roku 3 or an Apple TV. So yeah, we're still waiting to hear back from William as to whether he's tried any of our kind of out there at this point troubleshooting ideas, but
we're just throwing stuff at the wall.
We really are.
Because you got us stumped here, dude. He's the
but
stumper.
Thank you, David, for trying to help out.
Yeah, he's got a name now, William the Stumper. All right, Howard has an Emotiva. Now, this is the part of the show where we answer your questions. Now, we've talked about this before, but we try to answer every single question that comes in, and we try to do them in some sort of order. Sometimes we reorder them slightly. It's usually chronological, but we also record this podcast and stream it live at the same time, because he's in Canada and I'm in Florida, and we gotta talk some way. So we figured might as well do it on Google Hangouts. If you are a friend of mine or put me in a circle and I don't know who you are, I'll put you in on Google Plus. I will put you into my listener circle, and then when this thing happens, this
recording session
happens, you will get an announcement. It's Monday nights, 9 p.m. We're a little bit early this week. We're 8:55. That's unusual. And then afterwards, we have a hangout for anybody who wants to come hang out. The problem is Google has changed the way that the regular hangouts work.
I know.
Okay. It used to be that I could blast everybody and say, anybody wants to hang out. And usually we would sometimes fill out the hangout room, which was maxes out at 10 people, which is pretty good for 11 p.m. on a Monday night, Eastern time. Remember, this is all Eastern time. So, because that usually starts around there. But now it doesn't let me do that anymore. So now what we're doing is we are starting a hangout just between Rob and I, and then we're sending the link out via my G Plus page. I think Facebook gets it.
Yep.
And maybe your Twitter feed gets it. Rob's Twitter feed gets it. So if you're interested in hanging out and asking us questions directly, which we may or may not answer on the podcast, if you email them in, we're going to answer them on the podcast again. But if you want to answer faster than that, show up Monday night, 11 p.m., wait for that hangout link to show up, and then click it, and we will be there, and you can ask us questions. We are very approachable because we're on the internet, and you can't really get close to us and creep us out. So that.
Thanks, Google.
Thanks, Google.
Taking away something that was easy and fun.
That was really easy and fun, and now it's all screwy and it's aggravating. Last week's hangout was a complete disaster. My computer was absolutely possessed by the devil. Howard has an Emotiva XPA 5 amplifier. You know that it's got 5 channels because it has a 5 in it, and that's the way these things work. So while looking to tie up his cables, he came across a 2-foot, it's actually 0.6 meter, Pangea Audio AC14 power cord for $25 on Amazon. The description
Hmm.
makes all kinds of snake oily claims, but he really just likes the short length. So, do we have any thoughts about that? I have
No
lots
need
of
to
thoughts
spend
about it.
$25. That's
But
for darn sure.
seems to me that you get a cheaper one now. Okay, if
Mhm,
you're tidying up your cables and you want them to look pretty, and this
mhm.
one looks pretty to you, which I don't see why it does because it just looks like a black cable to me. But maybe I missed something, and it's actually got a braided cover or something on it. Uh, if that's the case, if you say I don't mind paying $25, it's the right length and it's pretty, I'd be like, go for it. But if you're just looking for the length, you can go to just tons of places. Yeah, probably Amazon as well. But you
True.
could go to well, I'm thinking what Monoprice for sure,
Mono
and
price for
find
sure.
a power cable that is the length that you want.
Yep. Parts Express as well.
Yeah.
They have these. So, for example, Monoprice has like a 1 foot length power cord, 14 gauge, which means it'd be pretty darn stiff, but it means it's the exact same thickness inside as the Romex in your walls. So, if you're at all worried about, oh my goodness, I need absolute maximum
It's
power over a
throttling.
1 foot length, which you really don't need to worry about a 1 or a 2 foot length. You could certainly use 16 gauge power cord for that. That'd be just fine. But yeah, like a 1 foot length is $1.10 for the 14
Ooh, a
gauge.
dollar ten.
$1.10. That
You
beats
could
25
daisy chain
bucks.
them and and still be paying less than 10% of the other price. So
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, no need to pay 25 bucks. Yeah, you can get a 2 foot 16 gauge cord. The 14 gauge is just out of stock right now, but a 2 foot 16 gauge cord for $1.50. So since Monoprice charges shipping now, I'm
yeah,
sure the shipping costs more than the
yeah.
thing
You're
itself.
gonna be spending $9 on that power cord, and seven of it is gonna be in shipping.
But yeah,
So
Parts Express has them too. So yeah, I this is something I really kind of favor. Like if a lot of products that come with a 6 or sometimes even a 10 foot power cord, and if it is close to the outlet, it's like coiling it up or
it's a
whatever. It is a
pain.
hassle. So
Yeah.
I don't mind aftermarket power cords for that purpose.
Yeah.
Get a nice short one so that you don't have a bunch of extra wire hanging around. But don't expect it to change the performance of your device in any way because it
I yeah,
surely won't.
it will not. There's gonna be no opening up of sound stages and revealing eyes and more air, stuff like that. That's not happening because it's
No.
just the same amount of air is in the room. Alan was surprised that we recommended he go with bookshelf speakers, which were the Sierra 2s, over the towers, but believes us that bookshelves can have a big sound.
They
Good,
sure can.
because we're right about that. All right. Now, it could be that you won't your mind will say, "No, it can't be big, it's small." And then you'll go, "Well, it doesn't sound big to me." And we'll say, "Well, that's because of your brain, and that's not our fault."
Just build a big cardboard box to put around him at that point.
Yep.
Trick your eyes into thinking they're bigger.
There have been more than a few speaker companies that have had a bookshelf speaker and a tower speaker, and the
Mm-hmm.
difference is that the tower speaker they put it this like they cut the top of the thing
Yep.
is just is just the bookshelf. Like it cuts it off, and the bottom part is just empty.
Yep.
It's
It's
the sand.
essentially a pedestal. It
Yeah,
is a non-removable pedestal.
that's what it is. And people are like, "Oh, this one sounds bigger than that one." I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
"Well, you're a dummy." So number one, does the ribbon tweeters in the Sierra 2s make them two directional? He's never heard ribbons in person. Doesn't want them to sound like electrostats. They are not going to sound like electrostats. Let's just get
No, and
that
in
one right out there.
particular, these ones. I mean, he's right that some ribbons, there definitely are ribbons out there
They're
that have
very
very
directional.
narrow dispersion.
Yeah.
There certainly are, but these particular ribbons that are made by a company called RAL in Serbia,
R A A
these
L.
RAAL, that's right. These have very wide horizontal dispersion. So from left to right, very wide dispersion. Vertically, though, they are quite restricted. You get 10 to 15 degrees above or below the tweeter, and you can notice a change in timbre. So they are directional vertically, but very wide horizontally. So as long as you get them at ear height, you can sit across your couch and have pretty darn uniform sound from left to right, but vertically,
All right.
more directional.
Second, for the surrounds, he has two rows of seats that are often all used by friends and family. Should he use bookshelves, or would bipole or dipoles be better if he's more concerned about the evenness of the timbre? Well, if you're worried about the evenness of the timbre, you should use the exact same speakers you're using
He
up front.
says he's more worried about evenness of the dispersion of the sound than the timbre. So
Oh, more
he's
even. I
willing to
thought evenness
take.
and timbre. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. I would probably go with the bipoles, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
That's probably what I would do. But what about the option of putting one like next to the row, one row, and another one next to the other row? What about doing that?
Mm-hmm.
If you go with bookshelves, we're spending a lot of your money right
That
now,
gets
by the way.
very expensive if they're all Sierra 2s. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know that I would suggest getting
It's a
Sierra
lot
2s
for
all the way
surrounds.
around. Uh, but you could do it that way as well. Um,
Yeah.
the dipoles work too, but
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I mean he's asking to explain what's really going on with dipoles and
right.
bipoles. How should they be set? Where should they be positioned? Actually, over on Audioholics, they just did quite a nice write up about surround speakers comparing monopoles, dipoles, and bipoles. So if you're interested in that, we'll have the link for that at avrant.com. But there are different characteristics. So if you start with a dipole, what's going on there is it does have two sets of speakers, at least two tweeters at the very
Yeah,
least. It'll have two tweeters facing in different directions.
right.
Usually
Usually
one
angled 45
angled.
degrees
Yeah,
forward, 45 degrees back. A lot of times
yeah.
they're trapezoidal shaped.
Hmm.
My particular ones have tweeters facing forwards and back, and and a woofer in the middle
Yeah, yeah.
facing
So
out.
in a dipole speaker, those two tweeters, at the very least, sometimes there is a tweeter and a mid-range driver for
On both
both
sides.
directions.
Yeah.
But they are out of phase. They're 180 degrees out of phase,
Which means when
and
one is pushing out, the other one's pulling in,
that's right,
back and forth. Yeah.
and
So
vice
they're
versa.
yeah,
So when they do that, what happens is right in front of the speaker. So like if you're looking at it, there'll be one that's facing off to your left and one that's facing off to your right, but you're looking straight down the middle of those two tweeters there. There's actually a null right there because they're 180 degrees perfectly out of phase, so those sound waves perfectly cancel right in that middle point. And the whole idea of using a dipole speaker is if you're in a small room and your side surround speakers are very close to your seat, it can be very distracting to have a regular just monopole speaker firing straight into your ear. So a dipole works by you sitting in that null so that you're never actually hearing completely direct sound, and instead you're only hearing this much more diffuse, reflected off of all the surfaces of your room sound. And that's sort of the idea of using a dipole. It's more or less fallen out of favor these days
yeah.
because we're looking at more discrete sounds, especially in object-based audio like Atmos or DTS-X. And the dipole sound has never truly mimicked what you hear in the theater. It's very effective at giving you a more diffuse, I can't tell where that's coming from sound. It's
Right.
like miswiring your front right speaker versus your front left speaker. You get this weird diffuse no center image type of sound with a dipole. So it's sort of fallen out of favor, and I'm not hugely recommending them unless you're in like a one-man tiny room theater and there's no way to avoid having a very distracting surround speaker otherwise. A bipole speaker can look like a dipole speaker, but all of the drivers are firing in phase. And when that happens, essentially all you have is an extremely wide dispersion speaker. That's really all that's gone on
Yeah.
there. You get some potential little lobing and comb filtering issues like you would by having two tweeters next to each other. But more or less, you've just got a very wide dispersion speaker. So, yeah, like Tom says, when you got two rows of seats and you're thinking maybe I'll only put one, it's not a bad idea to use a bipole because then you get a very wide, even dispersion of the sound. But if you have quite a wide horizontal dispersion out of a monopole speaker anyway, like you do out of the Sierra 2, as long as you elevate them and get them above the heads of both rows of seats, you're gonna get a pretty good sound just out of that monopole.
Yeah.
Honestly,
It's yeah. I don't know.
like I wouldn't have a monopole down at ear level. I think
Yeah.
that's always going to be kind of distracting.
It
But if you
usually is pretty
elevate it,
distracting, to be honest with you. I've had them there.
yeah,
You at the end of couches and stuff like that. And it
mm-hmm,
can be distracting. If you're sitting in the middle of the couch, if you just have a couple of feet between you and that speaker, as long as it's
mm-hmm,
like right next to you, it's not too bad.
mm-hmm,
But if there's like it's like this sweet zone that's right near it, that it's just like that's all you hear is that speaker. I don't know. You're running into sort of an issue here too, of where are you sitting And where are the people that care about sound sitting? If are you the only person that really cares about sound? And everybody else just like glad it's loud, it's got a big screen, because that's usually the case, right? Usually it's you, and maybe your wife might care or something like that. But generally, the rest of the people are just there to see the movie and really
Hmm.
don't care where the sound's coming from, and everything is fine to them. If that's the case, set it up so that wherever you're going to sit, it's going to sound good. So that means that if it's a bipole or if you go monopole or whatever, you can
Hmm.
actually set it up so that, okay, well, the back row of seats, the surround sound, the surrounds is actually coming from a little bit in front of them, but it's perfect for
Hmm.
where I'm sitting.
Yeah.
Fine. If you're really worried about having even sound across all these seats, what you really need is what a movie theater has, which is essentially a monopole speaker, going down the wall and with a good, good wide dispersion. Of
Yep.
course, theirs are really far up and very far away, and firing. You're getting the same information at both speakers at the same time.
Yeah, several of them, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I have to say, if it were my theater and I was setting up a theater with 2 or even 3 rows, I would just take the central primary seat, the one where I would put my Odyssey microphone first if I were doing the auto setup. That's the prime seat right in the middle. And I would put my surround speakers on the side walls at least 2 to 3 feet above seated ear height, and I would have them in that 100 to 110 degree range, exactly where all of the speaker setup guides say to put them.
Right.
And then the row that's behind me and the row that's behind that, oh well. Oh well, I'm not too worried about it. The sound is still going to be coming from the side of the room for the people sitting in those seats.
Yeah.
So
If you sit in one
yeah,
of those seats, you're going to be distracted by it. I can tell you that from
maybe. I mean, if
experience.
you're watching a movie,
It's bothered me when I've
it
sat
has.
down,
Okay.
because the back row of I do have a chair on the
Yeah.
back wall, and that's in far behind the surround speakers, and I was like, well, this sucks. Now that was before I had the surround backs, but the surround backs would actually be over my head if I sat in that seat.
Mm.
So I imagine it would sound even worse. But yeah, I think I agree with Rob. You can go either way. You could go bipole.
Yeah.
You could go with a monopole, and it just place it good for you. If you're really worried about a perfectly even sound, then what you want is a couple little, maybe two bipole speakers up there. I don't know. You could do that, but
Eh.
probably a couple of monopole speakers and one placed perfectly for each seat, each row,
Hmm.
basically, which would be up and back a little bit.
Yeah, I'll give Alan a recommendation, which is if you're going for the Sierra 2s for your front three and you decide you do not want to use another pair of Sierra 2s as your surround speakers, have a look at Focal for their bipole on wall surround speakers. Because as far as sort of getting a somewhat matching timbre, I think those do a half decent job, where at least it's not going to be massively distracting that they're really, really different sounding speakers, because Ascend does not make any bipole or dipole
Right.
designs. So, yeah, I'd have a look at those as a recommendation.
Infinite Gary is trying to keep things straight regarding how Ultra HD Blu-ray is going to work.
Hmm.
Just to make certain, and this is his first question, it was more of a statement. An Ultra HD Blu-ray won't play anything but an Ultra HD Blu-ray, right? Wait, I'm sorry. A disc will only play in a Ultra HD Blu-ray player, right? You can't take that disc and put it into a Blu-ray and get 1080p out of it, right? Right.
Correct.
Yes.
Yep. You will
Just
need
like
a new player.
you can't put a DVD. And I had this conversation with my mom, and it actually totally makes sense. She's like, I want to listen to the soundtrack of this movie. Can
Mm,
I put it in my car? I'm like, if your car
in
doesn't
the
have a
CD
DVD
player.
player, yeah,
Mm,
it's not going to work in the CD player.
yeah.
But I just want the music. I'm like, doesn't matter. Doesn't make sense. I'm like, you're right, it doesn't make sense, but it's
The
true.
discs are the same size, but not compatible. Yeah, so you can't, just like you cannot take a Blu-ray and put it into a DVD player and
Right.
have
It
standard def come out.
definition, right.
You won't be able to take an Ultra HD Blu-ray disc and put it into a standard Blu-ray player and have 1080p come out. Nope, you need a new Ultra HD Blu-ray player. Full stop.
Second, Fox has announced that upcoming Ultra HD Blu-ray releases and even shown some box art.
Hmm.
There's nothing on the covers to indicate HDR or Atmos, and it
Hmm.
appears as though you'll be getting an Ultra HD Blu-ray disc, a Blu-ray disc, and an HD download, which means no DVD.
No DVD. That's right. And I'm disappointed in seeing this because I was quite enamored with the idea of the digital bridge, which they have been touting. And the
Right.
whole idea of the digital bridge was you get the Ultra HD Blu ray disc, which of course has your 4K and hopefully your high dynamic range and your object-based immersive audio. But then there's supposed to be this, it is optional, so it's not mandated, but this optional digital bridge feature, which lets you either make a perfect one-to-one copy onto a copy protected hard drive that would be connected to that Ultra HD Blu-ray player, and then you don't have to use the disc anymore. You could just play your movies off the hard drive. But it also has an export feature, which is supposed to allow you to export a 1080p copy of the movie into a cloud, onto a tablet, onto a hard drive, whatever it is. You're supposed to be able to export a 1080p version. So by the fact that they're including a regular Blu-ray disc as well, that indicates to me maybe Fox is not intending to support digital bridge, at least with these very first releases. And also having that HD download, I'm like, why is there an HD download if you were supporting an export feature? So yeah.
That export that export feature is a complete red herring. There is no way that's happening. Just like an Ethernet thing never happened, right? It can do it with HDMI. It's supposed to have Ethernet in there where you connect any device connected, as long as something else has got internet on it, the Ethernet. Yeah, it never happened. Yeah. This is never happening. What you're talking about is never happening. It's never happening because why would they do that? Because when they can make you sign up for an HD download, which means you have to give them information, collect data on you, which means they have more chances to market to you and more. No, it's never, ever happening.
And see, I mean, Fox is all in on Vidity, but there's no mention of Vidity and Ultra HD Blu-ray working together in any capacity. Nope, Vidity is going to be like the download only version of ultra high def, whereas Ultra HD Blu-ray discs are the physical version, and apparently never the twain shall meet. Like, we also don't know this HD download. Which service is that? Is that an HD download on Ultraviolet? Is that through iTunes? Is it the Google Play Store? We don't know. It's just an HD download. I sigh.
Well, the thing that he seems to be worried about, Gary seems to be worried about here, is that there was no mention of HDR or Atmos. Yeah. I don't read too much into that. Okay, these are digital, mock-ups of what you're actually going to see.
True.
All right, and all they have to do is slap a sticker on the the cover, not the cover, but the plastic that goes around it that says Atmos or HDR or something like that. Well, if they decide to do it. So
yeah, these mock-ups were made before. I mean, the HDR logo, as far as I know, still isn't finalized. Yeah. The CEA still hasn't finalized the logo, so they could very well slap an HDR logo on this. I can almost guarantee you they'll never advertise Atmos or DTS-X because apparently no one cares about audio besides us crazy people who do or listen to AV Rant podcasts. So I don't think they see it as a selling point. I'm hoping it's on there because apparently it's not on Vidity. Ugh.
Very sad.
I am
Very
sad
that people don't care. You should care.
Yes.
All right. Third, reps from the CEA, which sounds like it's not the CIA, the CEA, were quoted as saying that Ultra HD Blu-ray discs with HDR could use tone mapping to make a 1080p HD TV look demonstrably better. Aren't there HDMI and HTCP issues? There are. I mean, technically, they can say whatever they want. Okay, they can say many, many words, and all of those words have meaning, but not all of them have to be exactly true. So, like, it's going to look better because it's different, and we made it different, and tone mapping, yes,
right,
yeah. I don't.
So technically, a manufacturer could make a new TV that only has 1080p resolution, but it still has a HDMI 2.0A port. It still has HDCP 2.2, and it can still accept an HDR signal. It would, of course, be down converting the 4K resolution to 1080p for display, but theoretically, some manufacturer could make that display. But these comments were primarily coming from Samsung. And Samsung is famous for having their, what do they call those little boxes on the back of the TV that can be upgraded from year to year?
Oh, like a module?
They have a name for it that's slipping my mind right now,
I don't
but
know.
it's their evolution kits. That's what they call them, and it actually is a full hardware upgrade that can give an old TV new ports, new copy protection, new firmware, even new processors inside for like streaming services and stuff like that if they want to upgrade all of that. So I think what Samsung is hinting at here is maybe they're saying maybe some of their flagship 1080p TVs that are out there that use these evolution kits, theoretically, they could release a new kit that would give it an HDMI 2.0A port, HDCP 2.2, and the ability to understand an HDR signal coming from an Ultra HD Blu-ray disc. So even though the panel remains 1080p, theoretically it could be. Now, of course, those panels are 8-bit panels instead of 10-bit panels. So this tone mapping thing is what essentially they're doing is dithering the colors. So you only have 256 possible colors with an 8-bit panel for each of red, green, and blue. That's all you got. But if you dither between two of them, you can sort of fake create one in between. That's what they're talking about with this tone mapping. It's actually the way that the current JS7000 series, which is one of their SUHD TVs, it's an 8-bit panel, but they're faking 10-bit color with this tone mapping dithering of colors thing. So that's what they're saying. They're basically saying our old 1080p TVs theoretically could be upgraded to work with HDR.
You could
Uh,
theoretically just take the entire panel out and put in a 4K panel as well. While we're talking about things that could possibly happen,
uh-huh.
and at the same time, we could make it hover,
Sure.
yeah, with a magnetic thing, and then it hovers, right? And as well, it makes grilled cheese sandwiches. We
Yeah.
added that functionality on
Well,
it
to
too.
be very clear, do not expect any old 1080p TV that you have from years gone by, do not expect to be able to plug in an Ultra HD Blu-ray player and even so much as see an image
Yeah,
because you do not have HDCP 2.2. So, yeah, I want to make that clear. So, that was coming from Samsung,
yeah,
this idea.
yeah. It's like saying I could, theoretically, we can make this Volkswagen Bug do 500 miles per hour. Theoretically, it is
Mm-hmm.
possible. Like if we
Mm-hmm.
did this and did that, we could launch it into space if we really tried. But it's don't expect to go down to your Volkswagen deal and get one of those. Adrian over on Facebook found Audioholic's preview of the new Yamaha NSSW 1000 subwoofer and
Uh-huh.
wants to know if we should really take them seriously as a subwoofer brand now. This is a 12-inch driver with a 1,000-watt amp and basically a 19-inch cube that weighs 90 pounds and costs 2,500 bucks. Yeah,
Well,
it's
it's
not a
not an
not.
insignificant design or an insignificant sub.
This
I
is just
believe that
this
they
is
could be doing this.
this is okay.
They're Yamaha.
They're Yamaha. Okay, think about this, and it's really a lot of times we get kind of wrapped up in like cost and stuff like that, and how these the internet direct companies, what they can do and that sort of thing. Yamaha can do whatever they want if they really wanted to. If they want to build a speaker that is literally the best sounding speaker ever, I honestly believe they could do that. They won't because that's not what they're about, but they could. They've got the money, they've got the resources, they certainly can find the talent and pay them what they want
Hmm.
to get this done. Now, looking at the speaker, forget the price. It looks absolutely solid. If somebody
Hmm.
showed me those specs and tell me who made it, I'd be like, yeah, that looks like a really quite a decent subwoofer.
Hmm.
I would have no problems with that. Do I think it's worth 2,500 bucks? No, but it's because there's SVS out there and
Right.
HSU and just about every other internet direct company that's out there.
Well,
Okay.
I mean, let's not forget that like the PB13 Ultra,
Hmm.
which has somewhat similar specs to this. The PB13 Ultra is a slightly larger driver, but similar in terms of it's a little physically bigger, but similar in terms of amp power and that type of thing. But that's a $2,000 subwoofer.
Yeah.
And they're selling it internet direct. So Yamaha's selling something that's kind of similar to that. Maybe it's closer to say the PB12 Plus, right?
Yeah, that's what I think it really is.
But selling that for $2,500 in a store where the store has to make their markup, it's not wildly out of line. And that's the MSRP. It might actually sell for less than that.
I imagine
So,
it probably will. So
yeah, I'm not seeing anything way out of place here.
neither am I. And people just see the price, and I read some of the comments on Holics, and God, I hate comments, but I read them. They're like, "Oh, you could buy 3 of these with that money, or 4 of those." I'm like, "Yeah, but they're not selling to you. They're selling to people who have $2,500 and want a good sub, and they want one that they can trust, and not just because they read on some forum that some teenagers love them, because that's exactly what that is. I mean, it's what forums are full of. And they're right. The teenagers are right about this. That the fact that you could get, 2 cylinder subs for this price, that
Sure.
would just destroy it. Absolutely true. But then you've got 2 cylinder subs for a person who absolutely did not want them and didn't want to buy from a company that he's never heard of before, or she had never heard of
And
before.
had to know to go online to find them, right? Because I
Exactly.
mean, this sub will be in stores, and it'll be sitting next to their Avantage receivers, which
Mhm.
maybe that's what you're buying. I mean, if you're going in there and you're going to put together a whole Atmos system, and you're buying it from Magnolia Hi-Fi or something like that, and you're like, hey, I'm going to get the Avantage receiver, the flagship, the 3050, that's going to power my system, and hey, Yamaha's got these new pretty darn killer looking 12-inch 1,000-watt subs. You're like, all right, maybe
Yeah,
that's how it
and you
goes.
put that bad boy on in a store, one of those
Yeah,
little rooms, it is
that's
gonna
right.
crush everything else that's in there.
Yep.
It's not even gonna be a competition, and they're gonna look at that and go, "I think that might be worth 2500 bucks," and
Right.
and frankly, it sort of kind of is compared to
Yeah.
everything else that's in there. Can you get a better deal? Sure, you can. Just like the people out there who are like, "You buy your own cars, I build mine. You're throwing your money away." Well, okay, let's just compare apples to apples here, not just you're weird and I'm normal. Let's. I am a customer in the store, and I am buying everything that I want to have for my home theater
Sure.
at this store.
Right.
I am not going around and value shopping. I have got the money to spend, and this is what I want to spend it on. If
Or
they told
having
me
it installed too. Yeah.
exactly, if they told me they were getting this subwoofer, I'd be like, "You picked a very good subwoofer," and I
Yeah.
would not say a thing about the fact that you could have gotten it for less. So there you go. All right. Jonathan, he's got 2 comments, but we're going to skip the second one because we're not going to get into that hot
Okay.
mess. Uh, we'll talk about what it is, though. Jonathan went to a local store and listened to some Focal Chorus 714s, which he thought sounded okay, but nothing special. Heh, Rob. And some B&W 683 S2 speakers. They don't sell those anymore or something because they're not on their website.
Oh, okay.
683 is not a number that they sell. There's a 686 and a
Hmm.
688, I believe. But anyways, they're bookshelf speakers, I
Yeah.
believe. Uh,
600 series.
the 600 series, which he really liked, and he liked them a lot.
Yeah. Hmm.
He isn't dead because he had ordered some ELAC speakers, which are brand new speakers from Andrew Jones, who did the Pioneer speakers, and he's hoping that they have a good return policy because he's already planning on returning them. Going with the B&W speakers up front would considerably increase his budget.
Mm-hmm.
Some folks over at AVS forum suggested that his Denon AVR X2200W wouldn't be powerful enough for the somewhat inefficient and low impedance B&W bookshelf speakers, but he's only sitting 7 feet away in a 1,200 foot cubic foot
Cubic foot
room,
room.
and he finds that hard to believe. He says we're free to tell him why he should not like the B&W speakers. It would save him money after all. Well, B&W, if you want a reason why not to like them, B&W is not the speaker company that's trying to be linear. They
Right.
have their own sound.
Mm-hmm.
If you like their sound, there is nothing wrong with that.
And
But it is,
lots of people like their
yeah,
sound.
lots of really, really rich people who set up recording studios with these things and
Yeah.
everything really like their sound. So you are in good company.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're really going for linear sound, then that's not what you're going to get from B&W. Now,
Mm-hmm.
to answer your actual questions, I don't know anything about their elect return policy. To answer your actual questions, I did go and look up here. Let me see if I can get my computer to go to it real quick. There is, I think the 686s is what I looked up because those were
Mm.
look like the smaller of the two of the bookshelves, and they are 85 or 84 depending on who you talk to. They're both of them are listed there. I don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
Their sensitivity is 84 dB, which is not that sensitive, and
Mm-hmm.
their impedance is nominal 8, but is what it says, but a minimum of 5.2, which is
That's not
not
that bad. That's
too
nothing.
bad. I
I
wouldn't
do know that
worry about
some of
that.
the older 600 series they were nominal 4 and they dipped down to like 2.2 in some of the
Yeah,
bass and stuff like that. I do remember that being the case.
but I disagree that you have to worry that you need
Right.
to get an amp right now. You are sitting terribly close to these
Yeah.
things, and
Like
that's
2 meters away, basically.
yeah, and they're just not going to require that much power. And second, if it does require that much power, it will let you know by shutting
Hmm.
down your receiver. And your receiver will shut down. You go, I need an amp, honey. And she'll say, okay, honey, I would like that movie to start again. You're like, I'm going to have to wait for the receiver to cool down, honey. So, yeah, I would doubt that would happen, especially if you're buying one of
Yeah.
these. Uh, but yeah, it's,
No, I mean the people suggesting that a less efficient, lower impedance speaker that you might want a separate amplifier rather than powering it with an X2200W. If you were sitting 14, 15 feet away, if you had a much larger room, they're not entirely wrong. That could
yeah,
totally be the case.
yeah,
But when you're sitting like 2 meters away in a very small room, you're the vast majority of the time you're going to be using less than 1 watt, right? Like 2 watts will power this thing to full average reference volume. And to hit the peaks, yeah, sure, you might need a split second where you could use as much as 200 watts into the thing. But the vast majority of the time, that's just not the case. Maybe 20 watts. Maybe you'll peak out at 20 watts. Well,
yeah.
your 2200 can totally deliver that, even into a 4 ohm load. That's really not a problem. So, you do have to keep in mind the distance, particularly from the speaker, and the size of the room. That does have an impact. And in this case, it would be no trouble powering those speakers. But yeah, I wanted to go back and talk a little bit about the sound because, lots of speaker companies are not targeting completely linear sound.
Yeah.
And one good reason they do that is because if you go to a store and you audition speakers and you compare them, you're going to notice the speaker that sounds a little different. Like if every single speaker only targeted linear and neutral, they would essentially all sound the same. Just like if every TV were actually fully calibrated in the store, they should basically all look the same. I mean, there might be differences in black level because of the inherent technology, but more or less they'd all look the same. But they don't want to do that because they want to stick out when they're at
Yeah.
the store. Because
Yeah.
you might say, okay, it's not perfectly linear, but I prefer it. Okay, it's got a little bit of coloration to the sound, but I prefer it, and it sounds slightly different from the rest of the speakers, and I like the way they sound. That's fine. That's totally fine. I just want folks to be aware that, hey, if you go and listen to some golden ear speakers and you love them, awesome. You can trust your ears, you love them, but they aren't going for perfect linearity. And if you hear a bunch of completely linear speakers, you do kind of go, oh, it starts to get a little ho hum because I'm not hearing a huge difference from speaker to speaker. They look different, they're priced different, but they all sound kind of the same. And the Focal Chorus more or less fall into that. They're quite a linear speaker. So I'm not surprised he says, well, it doesn't really sound different from the other linear speakers I've heard, but the B&Ws, they sounded a little different. I like them. So
Yeah.
that's all.
And a lot of times that's what we end up with when we're doing these reviews. When I'm doing reviews of
Mm-hmm.
speakers, is I'm listening for extension and linearity over volumes, and making sure that when you're when the volume goes up and you're getting some really high sounds or some really low sounds, they are they are it's not breaking. There's no breakup.
Hmm.
Jonathan's saying it's a 683 towers. Now I
Oh,
have to
okay.
click on. All right, so and that that linearity, that what you're looking at there, is the reason that I prefer linear as a reviewer and as a person that I listen that listens to this stuff. Wow, those are the big ones, dude. He's going for the big towers. You do not need that much speaker. Start with that. Get bookshelves. You're a crazy person. I just said that out loud. All right. No, these are the big towers he's
Oh,
looking at
okay.
here.
Well, I'm
So
sure that's
these
just what was set up at the store, right? So fair
they're
enough.
89 dB sensitive, 8 ohms with a 3 ohm nominal. Ugh. 3 ohm nominal.
3 ohm
Minimal.
minimum?
Sorry, they're nominal 8.
Again, they shouldn't be allowed to call that an 8 ohm nominal speaker then.
I
That
don't think
doesn't
so
fall
either.
within those
I
parameters.
think it's
That's
supposed to be
annoying.
6 or maybe 4, depending, but a minimum of 3 ohms. So yeah, you might run into some issues. But frankly, dude, get the bookshelves. Why are you getting this big speaker? You're sitting 4 feet away from the thing.
Well, because he heard them and liked them. So, like we've said, if you hear something and like it, you can trust your ears. But yeah, I mean, you do have to take setting into account. This was a store demo, not in your house. It will sound different in your room.
Yes.
So, something to keep in mind.
Uh,
But
yeah.
yeah, you were saying about why you like linear.
Well, the reason why I like linear speakers is because I know that the speaker is not my issue.
Right.
And when you're going to have that worry at some point, you're going to realize that this speaker, when you're going to hear some, you'll be able to start comparing music. You're like, well, with this music, it sounds great. With this music, it sounds a little bassy, and I'm not sure
Mm.
exactly why. And you're going to start to realize that that's the speaker, or whatever. And at that point, you're like, well, now what do I do? At
Hmm.
least with a linear speaker, you can EQ it, and it affects everything universally.
Right.
Whereas you might end up saying, I just want to knock out some of the bass when it's playing these particular songs. Like, well,
Mm.
that's a harder thing to do. All right. Rob, not you. Rob M, not Rob
Oh, we
H.
should just mention Jonathan did send in some other articles for us to
Oh, I'm
basically
sorry.
poke
Yes.
fun at with a bunch of snake oil and some insane speaker and interconnect cables. Wow.
I
But
didn't
yeah.
get to those. Synergistic Research, Galileo, Cable, and Interconnect.
Oh my
But
goodness.
I
Yeah.
didn't look
So
at that.
we're gonna save those for another time because obviously that'll keep. That's not like a pressing question. So we want to get to the questions that people have. So Jonathan, we do have those. We will get to those probably next week or the week after or something like that. But
Maybe we'll
they'll
do a
keep.
review of the review
Yeah. Yeah.
episode, and we'll just be
Yeah.
those. Rob M would like to clean up his living room setup by moving all of his AV equipment, other than the TV and speakers, obviously, into his basement. Ideally, he would like to have nothing but an Ethernet connection below his TV. Really?
That is what he said.
I don't understand how that works. Well, how are you going to get the HDMI? How are you going to get the picture to your TV? Is it just streaming? Does he just
You would
stream?
you would have to use those HD base T balance to convert.
I guess. I don't know.
I
Maybe
mean,
he
it can
may.
be done. It's technically possible to be done.
All right, that threw me. This whole question that threw me. He's
Mm.
trying to figure out the best solution for connecting his speakers. Though, if he moves his AV receiver downstairs, he would have to run the speaker wire from the basement to his living room. We'd want to keep it clean by installing banana plug wall plates close to each speaker. That seems like a lot of work. I can tell you from experience, sir. It is.
Yes.
It is a lot of work. And you know what the best part is? At some point, you will not know what speaker is going to do which wire, and then the wires inside the walls will, instead of being red and black, they'll be like white and blue, and you'll say to yourself, oh, okay, well, the white one is this and the other one's that, and then you won't write it down, and then you won't know, and then you won't know what's in phase and what's out of phase, and Odyssey will think everything's going. It's a hassle. Anyways, that's why we pay people to do that, because it is a lot of
Right.
work.
Yep.
The other solution would be to keep the AV receiver in the living room, but since he still wants nothing but an Ethernet connection, please tell me you mean HDMI, below his TV, he would have to run all of his sources into a matrix HDMI switcher, then have a single Ethernet connection going from the matrix switch into his AV receiver. So what's the best solution here? How would we do it? What have other people done to solve a setup like this? I am really confused by this Ethernet connection thing. If you're
Yeah.
saying, well, first of all, if you really want an Ethernet connection and you're using HD base T, then you can buy an Integra or a last year's Ontios,
Pioneer.
right? Pioneer
No, it's
does.
Pioneer. Yeah, it was the flagship Pioneers that had HD base T, but not the newest
Yeah, it was last year.
99. The newest
I thought
99's
Integra
done
had
away
them
with it.
too a year ago, last year. Didn't Integra have them as well?
Yeah, Integra might have.
So
Yeah.
if you really are connected for whatever reason to Ethernet and not like a normal
But the
HDMI
thing
cable,
was that was an HDBaseT output on those receivers.
well, that's what I'm saying. It would go up to the TV, which is where he wants it to go.
Oh, if he put the AV receiver in the basement, right?
Or in the room, anywhere. He still wants an Ethernet connection going from the receiver up. Oh, the only thing connected to the TV is supposed to be Ethernet.
Well, I think I think what's happened here is I think he has an Ethernet connection in his living room that goes from the living room to the basement. I
Okay.
think that's already there. And I think what he's trying to avoid is having to run any more wires in the walls. I think that's what he's getting at here, where he wants to avoid it. So he's like, I already have this Ethernet connection. Can I put everything downstairs and just use that because it's already there? I think
No,
that's what's going on.
you cannot. You can do it to your TV if you get an HD base T solution from top to bottom. You can do
Yeah.
that. that will get you a picture, but it will not get you any sound to your speakers. So you
Yeah, well,
have to run
he
speaker
could
wire.
have his AV receiver in the living room, so that takes care of having to run speaker wires from downstairs to
Yeah.
upstairs. He could have all of his sources downstairs in the basement, all of them connected to an HDMI matrix switch. Then the output of the HDMI matrix switch would have to go into an HD base T balun and turn it into Ethernet. That goes upstairs, where the Ethernet connection upstairs goes into another balun that turns the Ethernet back into HDMI, and that goes into his AV receiver. So he has a single input going into his AV receiver. All the switching is being done downstairs with a matrix switch. And he has baluns on either end of that Ethernet connection to convert it to HDMI. That could be done. That's expensive.
Oh,
That's an expensive solution.
dude, it's cheaper to hire somebody to run an
It
HDMI
really
cable for
is.
you.
Yeah.
If that's the problem is you don't want to have to run that. You want to use that Ethernet cable. It is way cheaper just to have somebody run that HDMI cable for you if that's the
Yeah.
real issue.
Yeah.
Because this is going to be expensive. Okay. HD base T, we should kind of talk about this. So HD base T is where it takes HDMI, whatever the normal high definition stuff is, converts it with a proprietary, solution into something that can go over Ethernet, and then it has to
Right.
have a converter on the other side. So
Yep.
if you're trying to go, if you're trying to go from just use that, then you need to have that HD base T. The problem is the converters are $100, $200, $300, depends on
Oh,
which
they're
one you
like
get.
300. Like
Yeah, I
300,
don't really
350
remember.
each one. They used to be like 700, so even
Yeah.
that's a bargain.
So, yeah, it's a pretty big ask. Uh,
Mm.
you know, so basically, if he puts all his sources downstairs, he
Mm-hmm.
runs and he puts his receiver upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
He's still wanting to use that Ethernet cable. It's actually better to have the receiver downstairs where you can plug everything to the receiver and do the switching
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
Because that would be insane to
Yeah,
try to
like you
do
said,
it
what
the other way.
what would we do if I were
What
doing
would
this?
I
Like,
do? I would
yeah,
not do
like
what you're doing. I would not do that.
like if I wanted to have all of my equipment somewhere else, maybe it's just even in a closet or in an adjacent room, and I just wanted to have just a clean looking TV and speakers in my room and nothing else, I would put the sources and the AV receiver in the other room. So all
Yes.
the sources are plugging into the AV receiver as normal. I would bite the bullet and run the in-wall speaker wire or
Yes.
hire somebody to do it. And I would run a long HDMI cable from the output of the AV receiver to the television. I would make sure it's the Blue Jeans cable one or the red mirror cables from Monoprice so that it can handle that extra length. But that is the way I would do it. I would not worry about converting the HDMI signal to Ethernet to make use of an existing Ethernet cable. I wouldn't do that. I would bite the bullet and do the in-wall speaker runs. So that's
You're
me.
going to probably end up, well, the speaker runs that. That's a done deal. No
Yeah.
matter what you're talking about, he doesn't want wires in his wall. So he's going to have to run speaker wire.
Yeah.
That's done. Yeah, and it's not easy, and it's a big pain. It'll look nice when you're done. I mean, you're running it from a basement. So are you underneath the room? Because if you are,
Right.
just drill through the floor or something. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know what your possible solutions are here, but there's other ways of doing this. But yeah, because with a long HDMI cable, see
Mm-hmm.
the idea of it makes financial sense to do HD-based T when you have a huge run because you
Right.
can put like 300-foot run of HD-based T, and you're just using that Ethernet cable. The cable costs almost nothing. Now those converters suddenly are a lot more cost effective because to
Right.
run HDMI that far, you got to have
You'd have to have powered repeaters and stuff
all
like that
sorts
just
and
to
by that
keep the
time it's
signal.
it's just ridiculously expensive,
Yeah.
so it's really not going to work. So that's when it makes sense. If you're just coming up from your basement, there's no way you can financially justify,
Right.
because
Yeah. So
you'll
if
end up breaking even at the best. You'll end up breaking even with what you would do with HDMI, just having buying a very long HDMI cord and running it in the wall, paying somebody to run it into the wall. The
yeah.
very worst, you're going to end up breaking even. Chances are you're going to come out on top.
Yeah, so if that HDMI cable can go from the output of the AV receiver in the basement up through the wall to your TV, and you can keep that anywhere under 50 feet, then that's the way I would do it.
Yeah.
If you're going to be exceeding 50 feet with that HDMI cable run, then doing the conversion from HDMI into Ethernet using HDBaseT, it starts to make sense. I would personally still keep the AV receiver in the basement and bite the bullet of running the in-wall speaker wire, because I don't see the point of having the AV receiver upstairs and doing conversion and then having all the switching being done downstairs. To me, it doesn't.
Yeah, if you're gonna bring the
Doesn't really
receiver
make sense.
upstairs, bring it all upstairs and put it into
Right? Yeah.
nice
Yeah.
furniture or something. You
Yep.
know. Whereas one of his sources is an HTPC. He wants to move that into the basement too, along with all of his other sources. What's the best way for him to control that HTPC from his living room? He's currently using a Logitech K83 wireless keyboard trackpad, but the wireless range won't reach down to the basement. He also uses a Roomy remote app, but there's only good for certain pieces of software. Any ideas?
Yes.
IR repeaters. If you're using if all that stuff you just talked about was IR, just you can use an IR repeater to do it.
For
that way.
Keyboard?
I don't know what his keyboard is. It says wireless keyboard. Isn't it IR?
Well,
or is it?
No, Logitech is using their Unifier 2.4 gigahertz radio signal thingy, which it is a little spotty over anything over about 30 feet or going through walls.
Yeah.
It doesn't do terribly well with that. So I have I think mine's the K800. It might be an earlier model, but I know what that's about. So yeah, what you're really looking for here is something that can work over Wi-Fi. And there is such a thing, which it's called Remote Mouse. You can just go to remotemouse.net. They have free apps for every type of mobile device. So whether you're iOS, Android, even Windows Phone, oh my goodness, even Windows Phone, they have an app and it's free. You get that, you put that app on that device, and then you also put a piece of software onto your PC. And you connect them both to the same Wi-Fi network, of course, and then you will get an on-screen keyboard and trackpad on your mobile device, and it works really well. So that's the solution I would go for, because you can have full control over your HTPC. Yes, it's an on-screen, touch keyboard and trackpad, so it's not quite the same as having a physical keyboard like that Logitech, but it works darn well, and it's all done over Wi-Fi. So as long as you can get a Wi-Fi signal to both devices, you're good to go.
Yeah, I think I used to have something like that. Didn't Logitech used to make? I thought they had an app that did the same thing, where it made your phone into a trackpad. 'Cause I know I've used that before.
There are
it was
several
yeah,
solutions.
so there's probably
for
something
that.
like that. So that's what you need
Yeah.
to look for. And if you have to, then you buy a cheap tablet and just keep it charged up in your home theater,
Yeah.
and that's what you use for your remote. And you can put
Mhm.
all the apps and stuff on there. John has replaced his entire DVD collection with Blu-rays for lossless audio and 1080p resolution. Will he have to do the same with Ultra HD Blu-ray?
Have to?
No one put a gun to your head to do the Blu-ray stuff, dude. I'm not making you do nothing. Says, will current Blu-ray releases even be able to be remastered in HDR or object-based audio? Will he be safe just keeping his current collection and using an Atmos upmixer? He's not too worried about higher resolution, just object-based audio in HDR. Okay, well, object-based audio is not really so much of an issue because, it's probably not going to be remastered. Some movies will be remastered. So, yes, you can. I think you just keep all your stuff for that, because whatever the upmixer is, it has been doing just fine. It'll continue to do just fine. But it's the same as anything else. Like, what movies get re-released? Well, the ones that people like you and frankly me buy in multiple versions. There are movies that I will buy every single time they come out. I don't do as much anymore, but I used to do it really, really almost, I want to say neurotically, but it was almost like a compulsion that every time a new Star Wars came out, I bought it. Right. Every time a new Star Wars came out, I bought it until he started adding so much crap that I was like, okay, now I'm bitter and angry. I stopped doing it.
And I'm sure there will be an Ultra HD Blu-ray release of Star Wars again. I'm sure of it.
The all Jar Jar version will just be Jar Jar.
It's going to be very tough for episodes 2 and 3 that were shot on digital video in 1080p natively.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you're going to turn that into 4K. Good luck.
Yeah. So, but the stuff that was on film, actually, I mean, there's no reason why they can't do all of this stuff with it. Some of it might have to be like remixing, and some, especially with the object-based audio, have to be remixed in some way. But they've done it before. They're going to do it again. They're just they're going to give you that option, because why not? You're going to buy it. We know you're going to
Right.
buy it. You already told us you're going to buy it.
Well, yeah, like let's look at the example of just on Blu-ray. Let's not even get into Ultra HD Blu-ray yet. On Blu-ray, Gravity was released, right? And it came out. You could buy the regular version that had 5.1 DTS HD master audio, and it had 3D on that release if you wanted it. And then they re-released Gravity with an Atmos soundtrack. Now, if you wanted to see Gravity with a full-on Atmos soundtrack just on Blu-ray, if you already bought the first version that came out, you had to buy a second one. If you now want to see Gravity, if they remaster it in high dynamic range on Ultra HD Blu-ray, yes, you will have to buy it again. There will not be any sort of magical update that you can download to turn your Blu-ray version into high dynamic range. It's just not going to happen. You're going to have to buy either a new download off of Vidity, or you'll have to buy the Ultra HD Blu-ray version. So, yeah, that if you're like, I want as much HDR and as much Atmos and DTS-X as I can possibly get, you'll have to buy new versions. But we do have these upmixers, and the HDR capable displays like Samsung's JS9500 or JS9000 series, they do have a picture mode that attempts to make standard dynamic range content look like high dynamic range content. It is, of course, guessing, it's making it up, using algorithms to expand the dynamic range of the original content. But a lot of people who have those displays and they've looked at the early HDR content that you can get from Vidity right now or off of Amazon Prime, they've said, honestly, the upsampling of standard dynamic range to HDR, it looks pretty okay. Like, it looks pretty comparable. So if you're willing to use the upmixer, I can tell you firsthand that Dolby Surround upmixer, does it sound as discrete as a true Atmos soundtrack? No, but it does a pretty good job of upmixing it to make use of those overhead channels, just like how Dolby Pro Logic 2X did a pretty good job of turning 2-channel or 5.1 into 7.1. So, you know, it will definitely be up to you. If you have a big Blu-ray collection and you're like, could I use these upsamplers in my new HDR TV and my Dolby Surround upmixer, could I use those and get kind of a good experience? Yes, you can. Will it be exactly the same as the new release? No, it won't.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Second, he's currently his surround backs are facing straight forward. For an Atmos setup, is this right, or should they be angled to point toward the prime seat? I always thought they're supposed to be straightforward, but
Straightforward.
it does look like it, and it's confusing because when you see those graphics, they're always pointed towards the same that one seat, but really they're supposed to be pointed straight forward.
Yeah.
The only speakers that anybody ever really angles are occasionally surround speakers if they're like really super high, but they're not supposed to. But your main speakers,
Yeah, your front, left, right.
Your front, left, right speakers, which you toe in to get the best center image, and your center channel, if it's low or high, angle it towards the seats. So that's the only ones you're supposed to.
Yeah, with all surround speakers, your goal is to blanket the audience in enveloping sound. So you're just trying to more or less get good coverage. So we do that by having them elevated a little bit and just sort of, you know, sending their sound out into the room where it can become more like ambient type of sound. So yeah, you don't have to aim it right at the prime seat or anything. Having them facing straight forwards, perfectly fine. Surround backs. Yeah.
All right. Sorry, I was reading this question because I'm looking at I never really looked at it. Anyways, David has a basement home theater that's also a children's playroom. His seats are only 1 to 2 feet from the back wall. He's concerned that this may be having a negative effect on the sound quality. First of all, he's read, and dang, Rob, for putting the link in it the way you did, because
I did. That's Austin, dude.
Austin, I got tricked into clicking on the AVS forum, and I was like, "What is it? What am I here for? I don't go to this place." Anyways, the place he read it was on the AVS forum, which, okay, let's just start right there. Don't. You ask us. Don't ask those people. They're crazy people. Anyways, he's read that reflections are not as damaging when the listener is very close or very far from a rear wall. Is that true? Hey, they said that you weren't supposed to sit between 2.5 to 14 feet of a rear wall. That's what they said on that thing. You are not supposed to sit between 2.5 and 14 feet. That's like every room we have ever dealt with in this podcast, aside from Chris's McMansion. Everybody else sits within that range.
It's
That
also completely not germane to what's going on because they're worrying about the bass,
yes,
which is like, what does the bass have to do with dialogue intelligibility? And by the
yeah.
way, use two subwoofers, which they actually did mention in that reply on AVS. They're like, well,
At
the
some
other thing
point,
you could do
somebody
is just
said, yeah.
yeah, the other thing you do is just put a second sub in the room behind your seat, and that'll take care of this problem. And then you can magically sit in this no-go 2.5 to 4 14-foot range. Amazingly, now you can sit there. Like, yes, you can, but it has nothing to do with the dialogue. That was
Yeah.
all the bass they were talking about. Weird
So,
answer.
okay, the problem with sitting close to a back wall is that the sound hits that back wall and comes right back to your ears really quick.
Yeah.
Okay, and that can mess up your how well you can understand the dialogue. All right, it's like an echo that's happening so
Mm-hmm.
fast that it just makes everything sound a little bit fuzzier.
And
If
it's
that makes
also
sense.
that being that close, that reflection is strong. It's
Yeah,
still loud. Like the farther away you get from it, the weaker it gets just by virtue of the sound had to
say 12
travel
feet.
a greater
Let's just say
distance.
12 feet. Yeah,
Yeah.
which would still be within their no go
No go
no go.
zone.
That would be just perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So yes, you can. Okay, first of all, he's read that reflections are not as damaging. That's not whatever these guys are talking about.
Yeah.
It's all garbage. All right. B, would adding acoustic panels to the back wall improve the sound? Well, it'll improve your ability to understand the dialogue if you're having
Yeah.
a problem with that. Okay. Yes, it will. His room is kind of funky. Oh wait, no, he's got another clip. Okay, no, I'm not going to do that. Okay, because his room is kind of funky. He didn't ask this question, but his room is kind of funky, so I want to talk about it.
Mhm.
So his room is wider than it is deep, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So he's sitting. The room is nice and wide, and he's sitting kind of in the middle of it, facing across the short side. So it's 27.5 feet across, and then he's sitting like in the almost in the midpoint of that wall, facing the other, facing out, which is about 10, a little under 10.5 feet. Okay.
Mhm.
He's got surrounds on the walls to his left and right.
Mhm.
They're up super duper high and angled down, sort of.
Mhm.
Is that right? I'm pretty sure. And then in front of him, he's got a television, which is kind of like in a reverse nook. A nook goes in, this comes out, and the television is on there, like maybe above a fireplace, maybe. And flanking the fireplace on either side are his main speakers, and then one corner off to the far front right wall is
Mhm.
his single subwoofer.
Right.
Now, if I remember correctly, I did click on this because I wanted to see this guy's. Nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. Yep, this is it. So I'm going to click on this. It's not going to work. But I
Yes. Slow
remember
computer.
thinking that he could do something different with his surrounds.
Ah, okay.
And-
Yeah, they are wall mounted and they're up near the ceiling, but the ceiling is a drop ceiling and it's in a basement, so it's under 7 feet high. So it's a little bit of an optical illusion because those speakers, even though they're right up by the ceiling's kind of low. So
Yeah. Well, I clicked on something, so now you were just everything you said was garbled.
okay.
But so I'm not going to make you say it again because these people all heard it. But I kind of felt like, yeah, you definitely need another sub. Let's start with that.
Mhm.
You definitely need to get another sub. But it seems like these surround speakers are angled too far forward.
Yeah, they're. I mean, if you drew a straight line going straight out from the tweeter forward where they're facing, then basically the left surround speaker is facing the front right tower up in the
Yeah.
front of the room. They're kind of facing that way.
You need to pull those things in so that they're shooting directly at each other, basically.
Hmm.
Uh, or maybe a little bit forward from that, but
Yeah, that might not be physically possible with those
might
wall
not be. I
mounts,
don't know
but
what his things are, but they need to be angled as far back towards your head as possible. I don't think that you necessarily need to angle them down that much either. I mean, they're really high, but I don't know. He's got a drop ceiling. I feel like
Mhm.
he's got some room there, but I felt like that was one thing. That was one area of improvement there.
Hmm.
Um,
I mean, since this is a playroom, obviously one of the ideas is get them up out of the way.
Yeah.
Don't have them on stands where someone could crash into them. So that all makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as for the initial question, absolutely putting some acoustical panels behind your seat there could help. I mean, we'll ask the obvious question. Are you having difficulty understanding dialogue? Do you find yourself saying, what did that person just say on the program? If so, you don't have to go to the expense of buying an acoustical panel right away. Get yourself some pillows, get yourself some thick blankets, stick them on the back of your chair there and put your head there and see if it's changed the sound at all. Because that's all an acoustical panel is going to do, is just a big fluffy thing to soak up some sound waves. So
Mhm.
do it on the cheap, run a little experiment. And if you like the results, then you can buy something that looks nicer and hangs nicely on your wall, maybe even has a print on it so that it looks like a piece of artwork.
Yeah, we're
Um,
gonna see about that pretty soon.
yeah, if you don't find any benefit from having a bunch of pillows behind your head, then don't worry about it. That's, because that's all an acoustical panel is going to do. It's not going to do anything different than a big fluffy blanket or some nice thick pillows behind your head are going to do. So
Yeah,
you
he
can
might be
run your
leaning
own
down that chair.
experiment.
That chair sort of like lays out, so he might be laying down that chair anyways. It might not.
Maybe, yeah. But I mean, it's a low back chair, so his head is
Yeah,
definitely above the back of that chair.
yeah.
So yeah, run the experiment. It'll totally tell you whether it's worth it or not.
Lastly, he suggested that he'd like to hear us pick a single topic and explain and discuss maybe once a month technical things like how OLEDs work, or how DSD audio works, or how quantum dots work. We used to call those deep dive topics.
Yeah, that's right.
We haven't done those in a long time, mostly because everything on this podcast these days is a deep dive topic. Like we don't leave, we just do everything that way.
Yeah, the main reason we're
So
not doing features like that is because every week we are so far having more questions than we're able to answer in the week. So we
there's a chance we might get through all the questions
possibly,
this
yeah.
week.
But I mean, our goal is
Be
to
very
answer
close.
people's questions. So if we get to the point where we have time left over, we would fill in with a topic or something like that. But here's the thing: if you want to know about any of this stuff, ask us a
Ask.
question. Because then it will become a topic. It will de facto become a topic by you sending in the question, "Hey, how do OLEDs work?" Well, there you go. Now off we go.
Because frankly, we don't know what you want to know about anyways,
Hmm.
right? We don't know what you want to know about. So if we pick something, you might be like, I don't want to know about that. Well, that's whose fault is that? You can tell us what to talk about. We are like monkeys. We will do whatever you say. So tell us what are you interested in? And don't respond back with, I'd like to know how OLEDs work, how DSD audio works, and how quantum dots work. Those sorts of things. Don't respond back with that. That will just irritate me. Because, why? Why do you want to know? I'm interested because of this. I'm interested because of that. All right, Martin. He's been planning to buy an Oppo BDP 103 or 103D, which is the Darby version, for watching movies as well as playing surround sound music formats like DVD-A, DTS music disc, and Blu-ray audio discs.
Okay.
But he recently ran across the Yamaha BDA 1040. The specs for both look good, but the Oppo is more expensive. Is it worth the higher price, or should he save the money and get the Yamaha? Uh,
It's $100 price differential, by the way. So
yeah,
the Oppo BDP 103 is $500, and this Yamaha is $400.
so the question becomes then, what exactly are you using it for? I mean, I know you're listening to these music formats. If that's
Mhm.
really what you're buying it for watching Blu-rays and for, doing this, then you could probably go with either one. I don't see
Yep.
any problems with either one. If it's less expensive. The thing about we like about the Oppo is it is got every bell and whistle in it for a
It
price
sure
that nobody else
does.
can touch. So if you are like, if somebody comes to me and says like, I don't know which Blu-ray player to buy, I'm like, well, buy the Oppo, because no matter what your particular problem is, the solution is in that
Yeah,
box
it's pretty much a
someplace.
catch-all. Yeah.
Whereas if your only plan is to play these music things and watch the Blu-rays, and you've got a 1080p display and that you're happy with, and that has good decoding or whatever, fine, you're
Mhm.
fine. But
Yeah, there was a
if you're connecting it up to like an older panel, and you don't, and this Yamaha player maybe doesn't have the best deinterlacing and stuff, and you're watching a lot of DVDs and not just Blu-rays, I might say, okay, well, let's take a look at these specs and look at some tests that people have run with like the different discs, and see how good this Yamaha holds up. Because playing a Blu-ray, I'm sure it does fine.
oh yes.
I'm sure it's just fine doing that. And if you're connecting by some other format, if you're using analog outputs or optical instead of HDMI, well, then that creates a whole nother question. Why are you doing this? What does it mean? And why, that sort of thing. So with the Oppo, I know it can do all that stuff well. With this
Yeah.
Yamaha, I have to actually do some research. So
Yeah, I've included a link to a review that was done over on Digital Trends where they directly compare the Yamaha BDA
yeah,
1040 to the Oppo. And so, I mean, their conclusion was very similar to what Tom just said. It's like the Oppo, where you're getting the value is it does a few things that the Yamaha can't do. For example, you can plug sources into the Oppo and make use of its video processing. The Yamaha doesn't let you do that. But if you're not going to be using it for that purpose, then why pay the extra $100? The Oppo has 7.1 analog audio
right.
outputs. If you want it to do all the decoding itself and then send out 7.1 analog, the Yamaha doesn't have that. But if you're going to be using an HDMI connection in either case, then why pay the extra $100 for a feature you'll never use? So, as far as actually playing all the formats that Martin has mentioned, the Yamaha does that, and it does it for $100 cheaper. So I have no problem making that choice. I also have no problem if you just go, well, I'm just going to pay the extra $100 and get the Oppo because it does everything under the sun. One of the criticisms of both of them is that they don't have tremendous app selections for streaming video services. Oddly, the Yamaha, I think, is the only device in the world that plugs into an outlet that doesn't have Netflix on it. I
You
don't
gotta
know
be
how
kidding
that's
me.
even
Everything
possible.
has Netflix.
I know. I don't know how that's even. It has Vudu and YouTube. I don't know. So the Oppo doesn't have the greatest selection of streaming apps either. That is one area where they definitely aren't the leaders. But at least they have Netflix. So
Right.
if that's anything, but yeah, all the audio formats the Yamaha is fine. So I know that's a little bit of a wishy-washy answer, but hopefully that's got the
It's
info.
not really a wishy-washy. It's a direct
Yeah.
answer. The answer is if you were going to be plugging it directly in with HDMI
Yep.
and that all you're doing is these things, then that's what you need. And if you're
Yeah.
doing
Save
anything else,
$100.
Brian's theater is 13 by 16 by 8
Mm-hmm.
and currently has no subwoofers. To fix this, would we recommend saving up for a single sub like the SB 1000, which is the sealed box, smallest sealed box that they make, or a pair of subs like the Klipsch SW110?
Which are selling for, I think they're on sale for $300 right now a
Yeah.
piece at Crutchfield. That's what the link is.
Yeah. It's got a 200-watt amp, a 10-inch front firing driver with a slot port underneath it. It's got a frequency response rated plus or minus 3 dB down to 28.
Okay.
Which is respectable, but probably BS. I bet it doesn't get anywhere near 28. But
So, I mean, I've said a number of times that if you're forced to buy your subwoofer at a store, which is sometimes the case, I think the Klipsch subs overall are a pretty decent choice. Out of the ones that you can get from brick and mortar retailers at reasonable prices and deliver pretty darn good performance, I do like the Klipsch models. I would say though that the HSU STF2 is very nearly the same price as this Klipsch SW110,
is it
and
325 or something like that? Is that what it is?
yeah, it's like 325. So I would get in this size room, so 13 by 16 by 8. It's not huge. Rather than spending $500 on a sealed SB1000, I would personally spend a little bit of extra money and go for the dual HSU STF2s. That would be my choice in a heartbeat because they will contend very well with that room size. And now you got two subs. But there's the question of how many people are listening in this theater because if it's only one seat and you're the only person, or you're the only person who cares, then a single sub can do fine. But I would urge you to go towards the PB 1000 so that at least you're getting the extra output and extension that the STF2 can't quite reach. Like the STF2 can't quite reach down to 20 hertz, and a single one might not quite pressurize that room size to full reference volume, where a PB 1000 from SVS would, an SB 1000 would not. So for the same $500 price tag, if you only care about one seat, I could see going for a PB 1000. But I love the dual subs.
I felt like this was like some sort of trick question. It's like, oh, they're gonna just bag on the Klipsch because they're Klipsch. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna bag on the Klipsch because they're Klipsch. I'm gonna bag on the Klipsch because you asked me if I want one sub that can reach down to like, what is it, like 22 or 20 or something like that. With that, what is SB 1000 rated to? It's rated
like
down
23. Like it's rated to 19, I think, or something like that. But that's with room gain and all that. So
yeah. Or am I going to want a sub that has two subs that only get to 28 or 30? probably. Well, yeah, I don't want either of those options, honestly. And I got nothing against Klipsch. I
No.
really don't. Uh,
No, like if someone had
but this is
already
not the right
bought a pair of
solution.
those,
These are not the right subwoofer solutions for your room. And what Rob is saying is better, I think.
yeah. Yeah, if someone had already bought a pair of those 10-inch Klipsch's, I'd be like, you got pretty good subs.
Yeah,
You got
not too
nothing to
bad.
be ashamed of with them. But since the HSUs are out there and very close to the same price, I'd say they're a little bit better. That's all.
Yeah. All right, so Tim, and I think I'm assuming that you have the answer to this question because I'm pretty sure it's in the menu someplace. And
Ooh, well, I'm hoping so.
I
It's,
didn't,
yeah, this could be
go through
involved.
this. Anyways, Tim, a couple of years ago, Tim added the Denon AVR X2000 and the Oppo
Mm-hmm.
BDP 93 to his theater at the time. When playing Blu-rays, Dolby True HD and DTS HDMI soundtracks wouldn't play. His Denon manual says all components have to support HDCP, even the TV, in order for lossless audio to work. So he put the problem down as his older TV not supporting HDCP and was forced to stick to standard Dolby and DTS tracks. Now he's bought a new Samsung SUHD, the big ones, and the lossless audio still won't play. Sometimes the receiver screen says Dolby True HD is selected, but there's no audio output. Other times it won't select any audio to play. Regular Dolby and DTS play fine. So, what's the problem?
Something is up because these components can definitely play lossless audio off of a Blu-ray.
Oh, yeah. That's not an issue.
There is no question that the X2000 and the Oppo BDP 93 are capable of letting you hear True HD and DTS HD Master Audio. So, okay, this has to be some sort of settings error, and Lord knows that Oppo BDP 93 has too many settings. I mean, it's got so many settings that it is not at all unlikely to have something not quite right. I will start at the disk.
I think this is a factory reset again.
It could be.
Just factory reset it and then do the whole setup process again. Because it's got to be, first of all, I just don't see how it could be in the Denon. It could possibly be in the Denon, but you would
unless
have
there's
to
a
really
malfunction.
Try. Yeah, you'd have to really try to make the Denon not play. I mean, it's like making a car not go when you press the accelerator. You can make that happen, but you have to put some effort into it. And that's the way I feel like this is with the Denon. So it's got to be in that BDP someplace, that Oppo player someplace.
And there are several ways that this could be happening. So I'll start with the disc, just because I'll go through the pedantic let's make sure we cover all our bases, which is that some Blu-rays you have to, in the the first menu comes up, some Blu-rays you do have to go into the audio menu and select the lossless audio track, because some default to standard Dolby Digital. None of the DTS ones do, because they all default to DTS HD Master Audio. But anyway, that's covering the disc. Now, in the Oppo Blu-ray player, first of all, you have two HDMI outputs. And it is possible, because even going back to the whole thing you were describing before you got your new television, it is possible to send the picture directly from the Oppo to the TV and separately send the audio using that second HDMI connection to just the AV receiver. So you should have been able to get lossless audio all along. You might have had to use two HDMI cables to do it, but you absolutely should have been able to. So now it becomes about the HDMI settings for the audio output. Now, there's two things to come at this. The Oppo 93 is entirely capable of decoding the lossless audio itself. So it can decode Dolby True HD, it can decode DTS HD Master Audio, and it will not degrade the quality at all. It won't do anything besides do a very nice job of decoding that audio. It can then send out a 7.1 LPCM signal through the HDMI connection. And that could have gone to an older AV receiver that didn't even have Dolby True HD and DTS HD Master Audio decoders built into it and only accepted LPCM audio over HDMI. You could have done it that way. Now, of course, there's the mental trick of, do I really trust that that's working properly? Do I really trust that without the lights coming up on the front of my AV receiver saying Dolby True HD or saying DTS HD Master Audio, that I'm really getting the full quality? I can promise you the Oppo does a perfectly good job. So that is one option. You could simply set the output to 7.1 LPCM, and the Oppo will do the decoding, and the Denon AV receiver should just show multi-channel in. I think that's what comes up on the front
That's
display.
what comes up on the front. That's
Yep.
exactly what comes up on the front.
So that's one solution. Now, there's a separate setting inside of that Oppo under the audio menu. So if you go into the setup menu and the audio section, that says secondary audio. If secondary audio is set to on, and then you set the output from the HDMI connection to be bitstream, which I'm guessing is probably what he's done, you will only ever get standard Dolby Digital or standard DTS audio. And I think that's the problem here. Because what happened with Blu-ray was they said, wouldn't it be nice if the director's commentary didn't have to be a totally different track? We could just mix it together with the original audio. Well, they went ahead and did that, but that only works if the player is doing all the decoding. And if you tell it to output a bit stream, it still has to mix them together somehow. And the Oppo only has standard Dolby Digital and standard DTS mixers inside of it. So that's what comes out. So you have two solutions here. One, you leave secondary audio on, but you set the HDMI output for the audio to be LPCM. That will be fine. You will get full lossless audio, but your Denon's front display will only ever say multi-channel in. Don't worry, you're getting full quality.
So
yeah, that's right. Option 2, turn secondary audio off. And then you can set the HDMI audio output to be bitstream. If you do that, then Dolby True HD and DTS HD Master Audio should show up on the front display of your Denon, and you will get the full sound. What you will not be able to do is get any of the director's commentaries that actually made use of secondary audio, which is hardly any of them. Because pretty much all the Blu-rays that were authored with any sort of secondary audio, they were like early on, and everyone said, well, this is stupid because people want bitstream output, so they stopped doing it, and they just created a completely secondary audio track that plays when you select the director's commentary. So I don't even worry about having secondary audio turned on. If that's not the solution, I don't know what is, because it explains what he has said. It is very possible to have set things up that way, secondary audio on and bitstream out, because that seems like a perfectly reasonable thing to do.
Right.
But that would have been the cause of the problems. So I hope that explains it for you, Tim. I hope that works.
That's why I figured it was something like that. That's why I didn't bother.
Because most other Blu-ray players don't have that secondary audio option as a thing that you can control.
Yeah.
You know, it just automatically turns it off if you select bitstream output. So I think that's really the problem.
Yeah. All right, Kevin. He was originally going to get a pair of SVS SB2000 subwoofers, but then he saw that the dual PC2000 cylinder subs are only $200 more.
Okay.
And there's no such thing as too much sub, right? You are correct, sir.
That's right.
That is absolutely
You
true.
can always turn the volume dial down if you have to.
That's right. It's sad though, when they're barely moving, and like I could literally blow the windows off this place.
And he is getting the PC cylinder subs, so footprint wise, they're not much larger than the SB2000s. They are definitely taller, much taller,
just a little bit taller. He's planning on having one at the front of the room and one at the back of the room. If the one at the back of the room could get its signal wirelessly, that would be more convenient.
Okay.
SVS sells a Dayton brand connection kit, which is a wireless connection kit that he's been looking at. It's about $80. Is that one okay, or is there a better option? The one over at Outlaw is the one we usually recommend, isn't it?
It is, but it's more expensive.
Oh, well, then go with this. It's fine.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, SVS stands behind the things they sell, and even their accessories, they still have the return policy. So there's really no downside in giving it a try, because if it works, then great, you're off to the races. So
and it's not like it's going to be a big mystery, right?
That's right.
You're
Yeah.
plug it in and it's going to work, or you're going to plug it in and it's not going to work. Those are the options. There's not going to be some of this, or what you need to do though, seriously, when you do this, because I think it's probably 2.4 gigahertz, is nuke something and like turn on some stuff around the house and see if that messes with the signal. That'd be the only thing I would worry about. Chances are it's not going to have any effect whatsoever, because if it's not like line of sight in between the things, usually doesn't bother it. But that's the only thing I would worry about.
Yeah, because both the Outlaw one, their OAW3 system, and the audio engine,
Yeah.
W3, which I am so convinced are actually the exact same thing inside. Both of those cost $150.
It
So,
would be
you know,
shocking if Outlaw had OEM something. Never happens. Uh,
that's
Kevin
all
says
they do.
Kevin says he knows we've talked about dual subwoofer setup a lot, but we'd really love a step-by-step guide so he can be sure he's setting everything up as perfectly as possible.
Mm.
Since audio setup and room correction programs are involved, he's a bit confused and concerned that's the very best way to set things up, like level matching, timing, distances, and exactly what all the settings in his AV receiver should be after the auto setup process.
Yeah.
All right. So basically, if you have two subwoofers, if you have one subwoofer, we usually at request that you do a subwoofer crawl, which is you
Mm-hmm.
put the subwoofer in your seat and then you put on some bass sweeps, all
Mm-hmm.
right, which you can get from audiocheck.net. Uh, and it's like a sweep generator, and you just put on repeat and just listen to the sweep. And what you're listening for is volume changes as it goes zzz, zzz, over and over again. You're listening for it to go zzz, zzz, or zzz, not louder. It's supposed to be louder now,
Yeah,
whatever.
that's
But you know what I'm saying. You're listening for it to cut out or for it to get louder. Okay, that's what those are the things you're listening for. It. Then you're going to find the spots in your room that where it sounds the evenest. You're going to say, "These are my spots. These are where I can put it," and then you'll figure out if you can actually put it there, or if your wife just insists on sitting someplace in the room. So that was where you go. But if you got two subs, you're going to put it in the midpoint of two opposing walls or in opposing corners.
yeah, diagonally opposite.
Done.
Yeah, so step number one is positioning the subs. We're not even worrying about connecting to anything at this point. We're not worrying about any settings or whatever. We're just either doing a subwoofer crawl for one sub to find a good location for that one seat. That one sub will generate nice sound. The other seats, we don't know, but for the one seat, it will. But if you have two, we're putting them across the room from one another. So position your subs, step one.
Okay, the second thing you want to do is, well, I actually wouldn't have said this, but this is what it's on Rob's list here. Because I guess apparently I am posting this. Do I have to post this? Do I have to post all these steps? Is
Oh
that...
no, I just put them as notes for us to have an organized thing, so we're not on the same page together.
Oh,
Yeah.
he's now putting words in my mouth. I'm apparently the monkey. On the back panel, you want to, well, some subs these days, and we were talking about this last week, they have those ports, those port adjustments. You're like, you can plug the ports and get this and get that. Do whatever the thing is that doesn't mess with anything.
Yeah.
Basically, you want it to be in its most native configuration. All right. The port adjustments is just not something I would be all that interested in. So don't, if there's port plugs to be had, you're going to leave those out. Usually leave them out. And then what I do with the volume knob personally is I always, especially since you in your room like yours, where you're like, I overbought. You're like, okay, turn it way down, dude. Turn it way down. The first time I turn on my I put like 50% for my first sub in my first room, and I almost broke stuff. Like me trying to jump up and get across the room to turn the stuff down because it was crazy loud. So turn it way down.
Yeah. Yeah. You're just looking for the neutral linear output, because I mean, a lot of subs these days, sometimes they'll have their own single or double band parametric EQ. They'll have various filters on the high end and the low end. They might have like contouring things or like different room size, whatever. Like, you don't really want any of that at this point. Right now, in the early going, we're worrying about positioning the subs first, and then just having the sub play its native type of output. Yeah, that's going to be our starting point. So that step two is making sure that the sub is basically unchanged from
Did you
its
say phase?
native
The phase thing?
Yeah, now the phase thing, some have a polarity switch, which is between 0 and 180 degrees. Some have a variable phase knob. Just leave it at 0 degrees, because that switch is there for AV receivers that do not have a distance setting built into their subwoofer output. That's what that thing is essentially there for. So just leave it at 0 degrees, because we're going to be going into your AV receiver now, starting to handle some of that setup. He did have a good question about, if one of them is connected wirelessly and the other one is not, because there is a slight delay that's introduced by that wireless signal. So that could potentially trip things up, but we'll get to that in step three.
Yeah. So the next thing you want to do is you want to level match. Okay. So with this, we're getting the volumes to be the same between
Mm-hmm.
both of these speakers. So if you have a receiver that has two outputs, uh, usually you can have one play a test tone and the other one play a test tone. If you don't, and you're using a Y splitter, easy, just unplug one sub and have the other one playing, and then you're going to have it. You want to calibrate to about 75 dB, and the receiver will put out a test tone. For
Mm-hmm.
that, you will need some sort of SPL meter. You can get apps that do something like it, but
Mm-hmm.
the one that we always recommended was from Radio Shack. I
It's
don't know
just
if it
kind of
still
gone now.
kind of doesn't exist. There are Radio Shacks where I live. I could go to Radio Shack tomorrow if I wanted to. There's one just down the street,
Mm-hmm.
so they still exist. But yeah, you could I don't know their SPL meters are all that
If you
accessible anymore.
actually just search for SPL meter on Amazon, there's several, and almost any of them are honestly fine for this type
Yeah,
of thing.
for this
Because
type of
we're
thing.
not looking for like super accurate frequency response or anything. We just want something that can tell us generally how loud is this pink noise test tone coming out of the subwoofer, and they'll do a perfectly adequate job of that. Because you don't have to be super precise in this. We're
Right.
just looking for the test tone to be about 75 decibels.
So because you have two subwoofers, right? What we're
Mm-hmm.
looking for is 75 dB in the room. That's what you want to calibrate for. Uh, so because you have two subwoofers in the same room, they do add some volume. Okay, they do add to each other.
Not as much as you think,
Yeah,
but
it's
some.
some, yeah. So you're not going to be calibrating instead of 75 to 65. You're going to be calibrating to 72. And they're going to add about 3 dB to each other. So
Yeah.
calibrate one to 72, and then unplug that one and plug the other one back in. And then, and when you're doing here is you're looking at your meter, you're holding it or preferably putting it on a stand
Yeah.
at the location of where the central location. And you're going to have that. Usually there's a microphone looking thing on there. You're not pointing at the sub, it just points straight up.
Straight up and down. That's
Okay.
right.
And you're looking at that little dial. You're trying not to get too close to the meter because if you get too close to the meter, it can affect the reading. And you're looking for it to get to about 72. Okay.
Yep.
And if it's not there, well, you go and you adjust the volume knob on the sub.
That's right. Yeah, we haven't touched anything in the AV receiver yet other than just getting the pink noise to play out of
Yes.
the subwoofer output.
If you can't get big noise out of your receiver, well, then you bought a really, really old receiver.
Yeah, all of these adjustments so far have only been done on the subwoofers themselves. So that's the nice part of this step by step. Now, if you have a more advanced system like Odyssey Mult EQ XT32 with sub EQ HT, which within its own setup procedure knows that you're going to independently have two subs. So it's not just sending a single signal to both subs in mono, it's actually sending independent signals to sub 1 and sub 2. So if you have that, all you need to do is plug in the setup microphone and begin the process, and it will
Right.
walk you through on screen. And it will actually do exactly this, except it tells you right on screen because the Odyssey sub EQ HT system knows that you're using two subs. It will say, go over to sub number 1 and adjust its volume dial until the readout on the screen says 75 dB. Then you go to the next step and it says, now do the same thing on sub number 2. So if that's the system that you have for auto setup, it's got you covered.
Right.
I do want to mention, Tom just said with the SPL meter, if you're doing this manually, or with the Odyssey setup microphone. Almost always they're describing do this in your primary seat, but that can be a little bit misleading because what you really want is your central most seat, the one that is centered between your front left and right speakers. Because some people say, hey, the seat I normally sit in, it's over here on the left side of the room. That's my primary seat. So shouldn't I put my measurement microphone there? No. Measurement number 1 in any of the auto setup programs, or if you're doing this SPL meter setup, you want the central seat, the one that's between your front left and right speakers where you would get a phantom center image. That's where you want to do these measurements because all of the levels and distances are set based on that point. And that's how you get a balanced sound within the entire room, not a weird off-kilter sound that only sounds good in one seat and nowhere else. So that's an important thing to do.
Yeah. So, right at this point, if you haven't already started the auto setup calibration program part, then you should start it.
Now is
And
the
just
time to do so.
follow the instructions. Remember, you want to put your microphone on a stand if you can,
Mm-hmm.
and then start with the most central location, which what Rob just said, and that microphone should be pointed straight up.
Yes.
Uh, some programs only have one measurement. It's just that
Mm-hmm.
one. Some have many measurements, 7, 8 measurements. Okay.
Yeah.
But you really want to keep those measurements pretty close to that first measurement. You're not trying to, you're like, but I really do sit all the way on the right side. Well, first of
Right.
all, stop sitting on the right side. The centralmost location is the primary seat. If
Right.
you're not sitting there, you're giving the good seat to somebody else, and that is a mistake that you were making. Sit in the center of, I almost cursed. Sit in the center of the of the theater. But you want to keep those measurements. Like what I do is I do one right there. I do one a little bit to the left, and then a little bit more to the left, and then I go back and do one to the right, a little bit more to the right. And I do one forward, and I do one back.
Mm-hmm.
If I've got that many, somewhere around, that's what
Yep.
I'm doing. I'm doing them all within that because we're just trying to get a spatial average of this location. Because really, everyone else in my theater can suck it. This is where I'm sitting. This is where it's going to sound good.
Yeah. Not only that, what the auto setup program is attempting to do is it's trying to distinguish between what deviations away from the target curve are because of the room and what deviations are because of the speakers and the system. Because it can fix the issues that are due to the speakers in the system, but it can't fix the issues that are due to the room. So if you measure really far away from each other, like, some people say, hey, I have 5 seats and they're really far away from each other. And when it's saying measure in multiple locations, I'm thinking, okay, I'll measure in each one of my seats. But the problem is you can have very different bass response. Hopefully you don't, because you're using the 2 subs across the room from one another, which should give you much more uniform bass. But that's a great thing because now you've solved a room issue. So when you're doing these multiple measurements, it says, oh, hey, the response is pretty similar in all of these measurements, which means if I see a hump I see the same hump in all 8 measurements, I can go ahead and EQ that.
Right.
Because what it's not gonna do is fix that problem in one seat, but then make the problem doubly worse in a second seat. It's saying I see the same humps and dips in all the seats, so I can go ahead and EQ that and give you a nice linear response, and it will be uniform from seat to seat. That's exactly what we want. So yeah, just keep that microphone within about 2 feet of that first central location while you're doing the auto setup.
So at this point, you've gone through and you've done all your measurements, and it's kicked out whatever your thing is. And please, for the love of God, don't do what I do. Is just press back or something, and then before
and
hitting
erase
save,
all the settings.
hit save like immediately.
Save. Yeah.
Hit save. Last time I did this, I was so angry because my wife was waiting to get into the home theater. We were about to start watching TV. I'm like, oh, it'll only take me a second. I'll run this real quick. I can run it from the other room. Blah blah blah. And then I forgot. I didn't hit save, and then I was like, forget it. Just come in here. We're gonna have it uncalibrated for this session, and I was so aggravated. Anyways, so you're gonna go, at this point you're gonna go back into your settings. It's gonna tell you, okay, this is all the stuff we found. This is what we did. How do you want Odyssey to be set? Whatever the flat one is probably what you want. But you want to go now into see what it actually did. So you're going to go into your speaker, usually manual speaker setup or something along those, and you're going to look to see what sizes it thought your speakers were. Okay, it usually is. In fact, I've found over multiple measurements, it's wildly different. Like my surrounds are large. I'm like, no, they're not. Shut up.
Right. Yeah.
This is large or that is large. Just stop it. Set everything to small. All the speakers are small. It may have changed crossovers for each one. Change all that to 80, or just go put, I think on mine it gives me the option of either having independent crossovers or global one.
Global,
I just change it to global, and it's all 80. Okay, for the 80 hertz crossover frequency, and you want to make sure that there's nothing weird going on with the subwoofer settings. I guess that's what it depends on your particular receiver, but most of them you want them to be set to something that sounds like LFE and not LFE plus main.
Right.
And if there is an LPF for LFE, if you see that, first of all, whatever. But if whatever it's set at, just make sure it's set that, which should be 120. It should be set
Should be 120. Yeah, we've mentioned that on the last podcast. That is the low pass filter specifically just for the point 0.1 LFE channel, which is its own completely separate channel from all the other speakers. And that low pass filter should be set at 120, which is the default. And some don't even let you change it, which would be perfectly fine because you really never need to.
Yes.
Yeah, so we should just go back a little bit to his question about, okay, I've got two subs, but only one of them is going to be connected wirelessly, which
Right.
means that it has a little extra delay on it. It is
Right.
not a completely mono signal. So if you have the very advanced Odyssey Mult EQ XT32 with sub EQ HT, you're golden. It will set the distances for the two subs independently, and it's fine. It will take care of that little delay that might have been introduced by the wireless system. No worries. But a lot of people are not going to have sub EQ HT. They're just going to have the two subs. You could really get into the weeds on this if you want to, but it really isn't necessary. What's happening is you've got the two subs, they're across the room from one another. Yes, one is, 10 degrees out of phase with the other one because of the very slight delay that was introduced by the wireless signal. But your seat is most likely not perfectly centered between them. There's a slight variance in distance anyway. And ultimately, the overlayering of bass waves coming from the two subs together, it's not something that I would be really worried about. If you have a completely variable phase knob, you could go ahead and set the one that is not wireless, the one that is connected with a wire. You could set it to 10 degrees off phase, and that will essentially mimic the 10 milliseconds that's come off of the wireless signal. But if all you have is a 0 and 180 polarity switch, then just don't worry about it. This is not going to be the end of the world. It is not going to destroy your room and suddenly give you horrible bass. This will still work very nicely. So the phase thing and the slight delay of the wireless signal is not something to worry tremendously about.
Yeah, and if you look at if you do have the sub EQ
Mm-hmm.
Odyssey version, if you look at the distances, you're going to see that one distance looks way different than another one.
Yeah, it's like
Maybe
10 feet greater
yeah,
than
it's
than
like
the physical
one
distance.
sub is 8 feet away, one sub is 18 feet away.
Right.
Well, that's because of the delay. So it's telling the receiver, hey, send that signal slightly before you send the other one,
Mm-hmm.
so they'll arrive at the same time at where the microphone was.
Yeah.
Also, if you have Odyssey, you want to turn on dynamic EQ but off dynamic volume.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, make sure you do that. Lastly, at this point, you're going to double check by playing some bass sweeps. There should be
Yay!
smooth. You should have already done this if you were doing the subwoofer crawl. Smooth, imperceptible transition from each and every speaker into the subwoofer, which you could test by unplugging subwoofers and playing 7-channel stereo, which would be totally weird, but you could do it.
Unplugging speakers if you
Yeah,
really
unplug
if you
speakers,
really
that's right.
want to. Yeah.
Yeah, if you really want to. The deep bass should sound uniform and close to linear in every seat that you care about, unless that seat's against the wall, in which case, if the transition from speaker to the subwoofer is not seamless, try manually adjusting the crossover frequency for that speaker to a higher setting like 90 or 100 hertz. So if you're noticing, if you do this, if you really, I would never do that. But by the way, I stop at the
Yeah.
Odyssey the dynamic EQ on, and that's where I stop. There is no playing of bass sweeps. There is no unplugging speakers so that I can only hear one speaker and my subs together to make sure that there's none of that. There's just me watching the movie at this point. You're listening to bass sweeps, and I'm halfway through the new Mad Max movie. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what's happening. Anyways, if you do find that there's some sort of problem, you can turn that global setting back off on your crossover and then change the crossover just for that speaker, and usually adjusting it up slightly to 90 or
Yeah.
100 hertz.
Yeah, because the whole idea is the two subs should be giving you quite uniform bass across your seats. And what you might notice is that in one particular seat, one particular speaker, there's a little dip right in that 80 hertz region where they're crossing over, or a noticeable hump right in that region when you play the bass sweep. If you go higher, now your subs are still handling the bass, which is going to be uniform by virtue of them being across the room from one another. And it's that transition from the speaker into those pair of subs that's causing the problem. So allowing the subwoofers to actually play higher is the solution here, rather than trying to force the speaker to play lower, which is probably just going to generate more problems. So that's why I'm suggesting you go up to 90 or 100. Give that a try, but only
Right.
if you're being anal about it like I would be.
Yes. And then there's the last thing. You want to say it?
Yeah, so lastly, if you're playing this bass sweep and you're noticing that the very deepest bass, so like below 40 hertz down to 20 hertz or however low your subwoofers go, sometimes if you're in quite a small room or a fairly reverberant space, you'll notice that even though you ran your auto setup, and some of the auto setups don't EQ the very lowest bass. Like Lee was mentioning his YPOW system. It doesn't go below 32 or 36 hertz or something like that. It doesn't touch anywhere below that as
Right.
far as EQ goes. So sometimes you'll find that you play that bass sweep and you actually get a big rise that gets too loud below 40 hertz or so. And that's all because of room gain. That's the sound waves bouncing back and forth inside your room and not dissipating and just being too loud. That's where you can finally go all the way back to that back panel on your sub if it had some other filters, a rumble filter, its own EQ built into it, those types of features. If your sub has those, now is the time to use them to fix that very last problem that your auto setup didn't fix. But otherwise, you should be done.
You forgot a very important step here.
Okay.
You did. You forgot the step is after you finish all this stuff, you put in that bass sweep simply, or like a tiered, like 20 hertz or
Mm-hmm.
21 hertz, just to locate all the things that are now rattling in your room.
That's fair. That's
Then
fair.
you got your blue tack,
Yup.
right? And you start sticking stuff
And your
down.
plumber's tape for the door
The
jams.
plumber's tape, yeah, the insulated plumber's tape for the door jams, which is what I use, which works quite well. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's a little bit of a rattle here or there, not too bad. I found out the other day that there's a resonant frequency of the grate on my AC vent.
Uh-huh.
Like, oh, look at that, that rattles, does it? Deal with that later. So, yeah, you'll have to do that a little bit and figure out what rattles, and then
Yeah, with dual PC 2000s, you will discover things in your room that rattle that have not rattled before.
might be your teeth. You don't know. We went through every question. We are, for the first time in months, caught up.
Yes.
Months.
Not that we don't have things that were sent to us today, because we do.
We certainly do. I got a bunch of questions today. I was like, it's weird I'm getting so many questions at the same time, and now I know why. They felt a disturbance in the force. They knew we were going to get through our questions.
And we did kind of skip over some of the review things that Jonathan sent in order to make it, but that's
four. If we had
all
sent this,
right.
he sent them like sort of. They were kind of back to back, but not
Yeah.
completely back to back. But having four of them in the line, it was just. I'm not reading all that nonsense because those reviews are always painfully long.
Yes.
Painfully.
One of them in particular.
All right, guys. It's great. A good birthday present was for us to get to the bottom of this list.
Yeah.
So there's that.
I feel accomplished.
I'm glad you do. I feel exhausted. If you would like to get your question answered, well, now's a good time to ask us. We got no questions except for all the ones we got today. So give us an email at question.avrant.com or questions@avrant.com. Rob at avrant.com, Tom at avrant.com. You can go to the website, which is www.avrant.com, and leave us a comment there, or give us a PayPal donation, which you do not need to do get your question answered, but it is very appreciated.
Yes.
Facebook.com/avrant podcast. If you would like to connect with us over there, which we are over 500 followers now.
Yay.
Yay, us. Twitter
Twitter.
at First Reflect for Rob, at avrant_Tom for me, and at Austin Pond for Austin, our producer, who has a podcast called We Watch Movies, which is about hula hoops. Strange title for a hula hoop podcast, but I don't judge him. All right. Anything else?
I think that's it. Happy birthday once again.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks to everyone who's helped out in all various manners.
Yeah. Our 500 followers. Tim for
Exactly.
mentioning us to Accessories for Less.
Yeah.
All right. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
All right. Keep you guys eyes open for that link for the after party in a few minutes here.
Yeah, you can try this hangout on air, but just never go live.
Oh, maybe. Maybe I
Yeah.
do that. That's good.